Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Brand new look at UFC 308. It's the first look, and it's a brand new look for the show, guys. We're here in the morning. The birds are chirping. The sun is out, and I'm excited to be here with you. We got the coffee. You know that we're ready to rumble today on the show. And I have to say, we've got two fighters in the main event that I've done very well betting on in the past. You've got on the one side, the champion, Ilia Topuria at plus 154. We hit the number all the way down to plus 125. Ended up closing a slight favorite, and he uncrowns Aleksandr Volkanovski, takes the pound for pound number one, knocks him out. Brutal fashion. And when a lot of people were down on Aleksandr Volkanovski and saying he wasn't the guy, I said he was the truth. I said he was pound for pound number one. I said he was going to whoop Max Holloway's ass in that third fight, and he beat him within an inch of his life. But then when everybody was ready to sell Max down the river and say he should be a plus 200 underdog against a guy like Justin Gaethje, we said no chance. We bet the plus 950 ITD. We bet Max Holloway plus 200, closed plus 145, looked like a minus 200. So I think when you look back, I've had a pretty good read on both of these fighters, but we've got a fascinating fight on our hands, right? We've got two guys that are both elite fighters, in my humble opinion. You know, if Max Holloway doesn't qualify as elite, I don't know who does. A guy who went on one of the lengthiest win streaks in the history of the company, did it at one of the toughest weight classes, bookended it with, he lost to Conor McGregor, and then he loses to Volkanovski, two guys that are both in the all-time great conversation in the featherweight class. So I think that you look at featherweight, and it's a elite weight class. It's a weight class that draws upon these guys that go on to have world-class careers that you talk about, whether or not they become, multiple weight class world champions. Their careers matter for a long time. Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier. You look at a lot of guys, Conor McGregor, they went on to have success in the lightweight division, but they cut their teeth in the featherweight division, a weight class that I don't think gets enough credit and respect, but they're getting that credit and respect this weekend. UFC 308, guys, it's the headlining fight, and I'm so excited to talk about it. What we're going to try and do today on the first look, guys, is we're going to do something just a little bit different. So instead of talking about every fight for around the same length of time, we're going to come in and we're going to give a pretty heavy breakdown on the main event. That's where we're going to focus the bulk of our attention. We're still going to talk about every fight on the card, give a quick first look, but some of these guys, I've only watched a handful of their fights. Carlos Leal, I'm trying to think of the other gentleman's name off the top of my head. A couple of these guys, I had to familiarize myself with them. So I've watched a few of their fights now, but I'd be lying if I said I was super in depth with their career. So what I want to do is somebody that we really know, like Max Holloway, somebody that we really know, like Ilia Topuria, we could talk about some of their habits, their tendencies, their betting trends, a lot of things that may matter in this matchup. Whereas for some of these other guys, what is the data point that we're going to go on? We'd have to just go on tape. We'd have to go on, what our eyes tell us, and then we'd have to go based on the betting odds. So for me, I think this should be a fun show. I'm really excited about it. And if you guys enjoy these morning first looks, if you guys enjoy the new look for the show, let me know in the comments. I'm really interested in your feedback. I'm open to changing, right? I'm a very flexible guy. So whatever you guys are interested in terms of the time slot, let me know. But for now, I'm excited to try this morning slot out. And like I said, the birds are chirping, sun shining. What better time to talk fights than right now? And we've got the undefeated 15-0 Ilia El Matador Topuria. He's taking on Max Holloway in the main event, 26-7. Max blessed Holloway. Is the best blessed? We have to find out. Let's find out on Saturday night, guys. Ilia Topuria is the current champion. On the other side, Max Holloway, former champion, the current BMF champion, a guy who's coming off the most viral knockout win that you could possibly imagine. And both of these guys, as far as I'm concerned, are still, relatively primed in their career. When you think about the fighting career, you tend to think of guys being in their prime maybe a little bit later than some other sports, because there is this element of experience, right? Guys have to go out there. They have to get their reps. They have to get to the certain position within the company. Sometimes it takes them till they're about 28 years of age to 32 years of age. That's sort of the sweet spot oftentimes in fighting. And you look at a guy like Max Holloway, he's coming up on the end of that sweet spot, right? 32 years of age, and it all depends on the weight class as well. For heavyweights, right, they may not even be getting into the UFC at 28 years of age, whereas on the other side of things, right, if you're looking at the flyweight division, guys start to age out a little bit earlier, right? They maybe have their prime at a little bit of a younger age. It's all these things that are a little bit weight class dependent. But I'm looking at a guy who's 32 going on 33 and Max Blessed Holloway, and he's had a ton of fights, right? If you look at the guy, he's been in a million fights. The vast majority of them are at the UFC level as well. And he's a guy that has been very difficult to stop, very difficult to hurt, very difficult to put away. I think those are the biggest attributes about Max Holloway that stands out over time is his longevity, his durability, his volume, his well-rounded skill set. This is a guy that, in my humble opinion, right, and you guys can agree or disagree with this, but I truly believe that if Max Holloway wanted to, he could have went out there and pretty easily and summarily outgrappled Justin Gaethje. That's my honest opinion. I think Max Holloway is very good on the mat, and I respect Justin Gaethje's ability to wrestle, but his jiu-jitsu just doesn't seem like it exists when he's fighting high-level opponents. And we've seen that a little bit against Charles Oliveira, right? Charles hurt him a little bit and was able to just float from position to position and kind of made him look 2 steps behind the whole time. And the same thing happened against Khabib as soon as he got to the ground, right? It was step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's over. And you look at a guy like Max Holloway, he may not be known for his jiu-jitsu, but his jiu-jitsu is very good, right? He just keeps it in the back pocket. Here's the problem, though. In most Max Holloway fights, his wrestling, his jiu-jitsu is his fallback plan, right? He doesn't need to pull it out very often, but he does pull it out when he needs it, right? You look at the Yair Rodriguez fight, and it's one that comes to mind. He was taking a little bit of damage in that spot. And so he started to say to himself, yo, I do not need to be out here taking these baseball bats to the side of the head. I could go out here and take this guy down anytime I want to. And we've seen how many guys expose the fact now that Yair Rodriguez can't stuff a takedown. When he can't stuff the takedown, he's going to throw up a couple submission attempts from the bottom. If you get past those, he's going to give up. That's just, like, with all due respect, that's just the way that it goes. And seemingly, right, a guy like Max Holloway showed that he can mix it up, right? Go to different levels. Not about ego, right? When he needs to, he'll go wherever he needs to go. But against Ilia Topuria, right, is there that exit strategy? Is there that backup plan? My answer is no, right? The problem being Max Holloway is very good at anti-wrestling. He's very good at anti-grappling. When you look at his submission wins in the UFC, the one thing I will notice, he tends to hurt somebody, open up on them in combination. And then when they start to, grab a hold of him, try and, close the distance, you see Max Holloway pull that guillotine and he's money, right? He's got a great guillotine there. He's got the long arms that contribute to it. The fishpole arms, like my guy Moyes Audio says in the chat, he's rooting on Leal. We'll talk about him later in the show for sure. But when you look at this kind of matchup, you see a guy like Ilia Topuria, and I think people that have just been watching his run through the UFC, or particularly that have watched his recent fights, or people that maybe didn't watch his earlier regional career, they don't know that his background before all the boxing and everything was a Greco-Roman wrestling background, a foundational practice in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So the guy's boxing is crisp. It's clean. I posted a video earlier on Twitter of him in 2018 looking very crispy, looking very fast on the mitts, boxing back in 2018, right? But when you look at this guy, Ilia Topuria, what he also has always been showing in these fights as well is the ability when he needs them to get takedowns, to move guys around, to throw them to the ground. And I've been really impressed by what I've seen him put on tape in terms of getting a hold of somebody, lateral drop, throwing people into the background. You're seeing a bunch of guys. Oh, shout out to Pick'em. MMA says you're live during media day. Had to leave the interviews to say what's up. Appreciate that, my man. And MMA Locksmith says my making coffee and about to kick it with the MMA crew. Big ups and good luck this weekend. I appreciate you big time. Thank you so much, and appreciate everybody who's rocking with us live this early in the morning. But what we will say to get back to this fight is you look at a guy like Ilia Topuria, and when he first came to the UFC, it was takedown, takedown, takedown against Yusuf Zalal. And I had always thought that Yusuf Zalal was a better fighter than his run out of results in the UFC. And then he got 5 finishes or whatever it was on the regional scene, came back to the UFC. And did y'all see what he did to our guy, Billy Q? I think it was like plus 125 that we got Yusuf Zalal in that fight. He ends up closing as a favorite, and he looked like he should have been minus 400 with all due respect. He just went out there and absolutely showed a speed difference, a level difference. He took the back. He dominated him in the first round. He finished in the second round. So you saw Yusuf Zalal is a whole different ball game these days, right? But Ilia Topuria came in on short notice against a guy who's got this crazy pace, cardio, never wants to fuck off, right? And he put him through the paces, submission attempt, submission attempt, submission attempt, takedown, takedown, takedown. And I was really impressed by what I saw from Ilia throughout his career in terms of his ability to get takedowns when he needs them against Josh Emmett, another guy who's low center of gravity, stout, difficult guy to wrestle. He was able to get takedowns when he wanted them on Josh as well, run through him with that double. Like, he's strong. He's got a good build to wrestle. He's low to the ground. He's closer to your hips, but he's very strong physically, and he knows where to put his head in terms of positioning. He can either go to the outside and lift for a takedown, or he can go head to the chest and run through people because he's got that physicality. And ironically, the Matador fights like a bull, man. He puts his head in somebody's chest. He runs them right the hell over. And there's nary a thing they could do about it. Now, the thing that's really compelling about this matchmaking, in my view, is besides the grappling component, right, which I think normally Max Holloway comes in with a default advantage. I think you cancel that out here. I would honestly say Ilia has the advantage on paper in a pure grappling match between these two guys, especially while they're both fresh. Maybe if Max uses his pace, his cardio to leverage that later in the fight, that could be a path for him in terms of grappling. But ultimately, I think that Ilia is the guy who's better equipped in that phase. So then the question is, okay, on the feet, that's where this fight is money. That's where everybody that's a UFC fan wants to watch this fight. Why? Ilia Topuria, a lot of people would put him forward if you said, who's the best boxer in the UFC? And maybe he's not always the cleanest, right? Maybe the thing that catches him sometimes is that kickboxing, right? He likes to box. He likes to move. He likes to weave. He likes to do all these things, including with head movement, that set you up sometimes to get kicked. And so that's been a constant recurring problem for him throughout his career. But boxing for boxing, this guy's money. This guy hits like a truck. His combinations are clean. He's fast. He knows when to throw. He picks his shots well. He can go on the counter. He can go on offense. He can push you back to the fence and then force a reaction out of you and then hit you with the kill switch. This guy has real bricks for hands. When he hits people, they don't effing move, right? Like Jeremy Stevens said. So I think of a guy like Ilia as a nightmare, right? Like, where do you want to fight this guy? You want to fight him on the ground? He's very, very good there. You want to fight him on the feet? He's very dangerous there. It's like, you don't want to fight this guy. He's a very difficult guy to fight. I think there's a reason he's the champion. On the other side, why do you not want to fight a guy like Max Holloway? Number one, the guys that are really difficult to fight in terms of like trying to get yourself up for the contest. What if I hit him with my best punch and he just doesn't go down? This guy, Max Holloway, known for being brick durable, right? Just does not go down to punches, does not go down to damage, can get hurt, can get rocked occasionally, very rarely, like the Dustin Poirier fight, but he just sticks through it. And guys, go look at Max Holloway. He's so damaged in that Dustin Poirier fight, right? His face looks like it was put through the meat grinder. And then in between rounds, Dustin, because Dustin's a gangster, stands up and looks at him, and he's like pointing at him across the cage, like, we're going to do this right now. And he's like pointing down, kind of doing the Max Holloway to Max Holloway. And Max, still cool as a cucumber with his face just melting, is just standing up with a grin on his face, pointing down to the ground like, yep, I'm not going nowhere. I'm still here. I'll still meet you in the middle. And I was just like, what do you got to do to kill this guy? Like, he is a zombie. He does have an ability to withstand damage, right? He's got the Hawaiian genetics. We got to just say, guys, Hawaiians, tough. Very tough people on average, right? You see these kids in middle school fights and they're throwing leg kicks and they're checking and they're countering. You're like, all right, they're built different in Hawaii, right? Like, Max Holloway grew up fighting. So the guy has no problem going 5 rounds, throwing punches all day, getting hit. The question is, is Ilia the guy that can knock him out? I tweeted this a long time ago. Like, if you just look at the videos of Ilia landing big punches, you look at the guys that have landed on Max Holloway recently, you're like, Max doesn't want to be there for these punches from this guy. And then the other question you have to ask are, what are the intangibles here? And I think there are some major intangibles we have to talk about. Let's start with one. Max Holloway. Why was I so confident in him against Justin Gaethje? I bet, multiple units. And then I also had the ITD. And I bet the sub, by the way, which that one was square, I'll admit, in a BMF title fight. But when you look back, I beat the number by a lot. And I think if Max wanted to submit him, he submits him. But in any case, you look back and you say to yourself, okay, what was the difference there? Max Holloway, a guy who has been known to have some weird issues on the scale, right? Getting pulled from fights, offering to do fights on short notice, then he gets pulled from the fight, having some concussion issues. If you guys haven't been around for a long time in the MMA space, I welcome you aboard, right? I'm not somebody that gatekeeps and says, like, if you're a new fan, like, get the hell out of here and you're a casual. No, I welcome you aboard. But let's educate, right? Let's talk about the past. Max Holloway, guys, had weird interviews where he went on TV and they thought he was concussed and they thought he was having problems. And there was a lot of worry. People forget that Brian T. City Ortega, who's now looked at it in a different light, closed as a favorite against Max Holloway. People thought he was going to win against Max Holloway as the champion. And Max is literally out there teaching him how to box, putting the hands up, beating him around the head, neck, and chest. Like, Max Holloway has been there, done that, and gotten a t-shirt a million times over. And at 155 pounds, I love this guy, right? Because then he's got all the cardio for days and he can go out there and throw it. And he's very durable. And it's going to be very hard to put him away at 155 when he's got all that water in his brain. But why do people, sometimes struggle when they cut weight? When you cut a lot of weight, you just are a little bit more susceptible to getting knocked out. Your body doesn't feel as good, right? You can't take as much. And I worry about Max Holloway going and doing this balloon stuff, right? Go at 145, then 155. He had said the difference between me at 155 last time and the difference between me at 155 this time is all the stuff I'm doing with strength and conditioning. And guys, I watched it all. I was on Max Holloway's YouTube. He was out there putting up all the videos, right? Where he would say, like, I'm doing my lifting and look at me lift all these weights. And I watched him lifting all these weights with his guys. And they're talking about, we're putting on the weight. We're not going to do it like last time against Poirier, where we've got the muffin top and all that. We're going to be serious and we're putting on the right weight. Okay. I'm supposed to believe that. And then I'm also supposed to believe we're what? Now cutting off all that muscle that we just built up. We're emaciating ourselves to get back down to 145. Like, just from a career management standpoint, I didn't like this fight. Like, Michael Chandler, I think Max Holloway would go dummy Michael Chandler. That's the God's honest truth. I think he would beat him about the head, neck, and chest and dance him around the octagon and beat him up really bad. That's how I see it going. But he didn't get that fight, right? He instead took this fight. And this is a much more difficult fight. The one thing I want to instill as well is this. I remember, and by the way, I'm not proclaiming anything, right? So if you say to me in the comments right now, like, Liam, I'm betting on Max Holloway, like, God bless, right? If you say, Liam, I'm hammering Ilia Topuria, also God bless. I think this is a tricky fight to bet on. You look at the betting odds, right? And you have a substantial favorite price tag next to Ilia Topuria. Last time out, Ilia Topuria was plus 154, plus 125. I was very glad to hit those numbers on the way down. I thought a pick'em price at minimum was appropriate. That's eventually where we ended up getting to. But if you look at this matchup, you have a Max Holloway at a similar price, right? Last time out, he was about plus 200 against Justin Gaethje, got bet down to about a plus 145 or so. Now you're looking at, okay, about a plus 195. I anticipate, I could be wrong about this, I anticipate there will be action that comes in on Max throughout the course of the week. That's my gut feeling here. Let's pull up our friends over at Fight Numbers, have the best available odds right now. So we're going to share this tab for a second. Shout out to the folks over at Fight Numbers. If you use my promo code Liam, they will hook you up with a discount. These are the best available prices. But guys, you could also just go ahead and look at the odds board. You could look at Bovada, Caesar Sportsbook, Bet Any Sports, Pinnacle, Bet Online, a variety of different sportsbooks, Sharp and Square. You can compare them, or you could just toggle the best prices if you're looking to shop around. And right now, the best available price on Ilia Topuria is minus 235. You're looking at about a 70% indication on the champion. Meanwhile, Max Holloway, the great Max Holloway, Circa Sportsbook, plus 210 on the comeback. And, again, about a 30% chance here that they're giving Max Holloway to get the win. And I think that Max Holloway is a great fighter, man. I think he's worthy of a lot of respect, but I do think this is a tough matchup for him. And I'm curious to hear what you guys think as well in the comments. Shout out to our guy, Tone Miggins, says smash the like. I appreciate that big time. Shout out to Jake Fagan as well. Appreciate you all for chiming in. Adam Whitehead is liking the beaten about the head, neck, and chest comment. I appreciate you, my man. That's a great one. KO and Gaethje was the best and worst thing that happened to him because now he thinks he's going to sleep Topuria and get caught. Oh, okay. Interesting. So here's the thing. Now let's talk about the sports psychology, right? I said last time, and some people actually mocked me for this on Twitter. And I'm not proclaiming that I'm right. I'm just proclaiming it's my opinion. All I could do is tell you the truth as I see it. And I thought that the huge difference between Ilia and Volk going into the last fight was confidence. And I think Volk is a great fighter. I've always proclaimed that. You guys can go back and find my Volk pound for pound truther claims when people said it was Usman. And then Usman got his head kicked off and I was vindicated. But in any case, you look back and a guy like Volkanovski, the performance he put on against Max Holloway in that third fight is nothing short of sensational, right? It was an absolutely sensational performance. But then he went out there and he fought Islam, and his confidence was not broken by the first fight, right? He goes out there, he's got a great fight, and he has a very back and forth fight with the new pound for pound number one. And I'll acknowledge that Islam took it that night, right? I said, maybe you give it to Volk based on the weight of the evidence and all the stuff he's done. But you look at the Charles Oliveira win, the Volkanovski win, the bulk of what he's done. You just say, man, okay, maybe you tip the cap to Islam then, and it's not Volk's time anymore. But then to take the fight on short notice after he gets the win over Yair, that was clean as a whistle, right? He just did whatever he needed to beat Yair, and then he gets the clean win there. I think there was like a slight clash of heads. Maybe that's the only controversy there, but ultimately, I don't think anybody's going to be losing sleep over that. It just was what it was, and kind of the writing was on the wall. He could get a takedown anytime he wanted to in that fight. So then you say, okay, he takes the fight again with Islam, and he gets brutally knocked out. He looked fat, right? Again, this is just subjective. He'll tell you all this, right? If you ask him, like, he looked fat, he looked unprepared, and he got owned. The reason that that's a problem is, number one, it spoke to a couple things. Self-sabotage. He kind of spoke about that as well. But, he said, like, I just couldn't imagine, like, sitting at home with the wife and the kids and whatever. I needed to get out. So I just took this fight. And for me, that's suboptimal, right? Like, that's saying I kind of just put myself in a position to fail. And I didn't like that. But I don't think that's what cost him against Ilia. But what had changed? This guy went from being, I will never bend, break, I cannot be defeated, to I know for a fact I can be brutally knocked out. That's a hard thing for fighters to reckon with. And we've seen it a million times where guys never come back the same. They get knocked out one time, they're either never back or they don't come back the same. When they come back, they're a shell of themselves. They're more timid. And this is not a criticism, right? This is not me trying to, lobby things at people. It's just to say, trying to be an analyst, trying to observe what you see. I've seen it a lot of times where a fighter gets knocked out and then they do not have the same willingness to engage or the same desire. And they're a little more fearful about throwing. They're a little more fearful about getting hit on the return. And I think that all those reactions actually make you more likely to get knocked out, right? Being really tense, being really timid, backing up, exposing your chin, these kind of things that people do when they're panicking, I think it's a result in part of a lack of confidence, which is why, you don't know what you don't know. If you've never been knocked out, you feel like you're invincible, right? I can keep walking forward. I can keep getting hit. They can't put me down. And eventually, everybody's bill comes due if they're in the game long enough, if they get hit long enough. You look at a guy like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, guys, who's known for having a tremendous, impeccable chin. The guy fought all these kickboxing fights, tremendous chin. He fought Anthony Pettis, and Anthony Pettis chopped at his calf until he got one clean punch, and the guy died like a sack of potatoes because he's a human being. And when you get hit on your chin, sometimes you just go to sleep, even if you're a tough guy, even if you've been around a long time, even if you're really seasoned, even if you're well conditioned, like all these things. So I just think that when you have a guy like Ilia Topuria, one thing that you will take away if you watch any of his footage, if you pay attention to any of his stuff, the guy is very, very professional. He's very dialed into what he's doing, and he's extremely confident. And guys, when I tell you that I was very bullish on his side against Volkanovski because I liked his skills, and most importantly, I loved his confidence. He had no doubt he was going to win the fight. There are guys that go into title fights not even believing they have a chance, right? They go in, they're like, thank goodness I got this opportunity. Let's see if I can make some money. Let's see if I can turn this into a promotional opportunity, but I am not going to win the fight. So like, this is my week to get famous and do other things and take in the moments and the experience, wave to the crowd, sign some autographs and stuff, but it's not going to be my night. He didn't feel that way at all. He did not feel like I'm here to ride along the coats of the champion. He said, yeah, I respect this guy, but I'm going to put him to sleep. I'm going to brutally knock him out. Like, he has no compunction about the way he's going to perform. And for me, I like guys like that. I like guys that come in and they know the job. They know exactly what they want to do. They know how they can execute, and they have full faith and confidence that that's the way it's going to play out. And you look at a guy like Max Holloway, and I think that the way he needs to win this fight is by surviving an early storm, right? Continuing to show that legendary durability that he's relied on throughout his career. But here's where I get concerned. I think I've seen a little writing on the wall, okay? Even though I love Max Holloway, even though I've been betting Max Holloway, I'm just trying to call it the way I see it. And I bet Yair Rodriguez, small, but I bet Yair Rodriguez against Max Holloway. And I know that that didn't work out, right? I didn't make any money from that. But he hit him really hard, and he tested the chin. And like I said, he turned him into a wrestler. And that's all respect, right? If you could wrestle somebody and they can't wrestle, that's on them. But you look at this guy, and I say, you know, the shots are starting to get through, right? People are starting to land a little bit on Max Holloway. Even though he puts up these huge numbers in terms of volume, we've definitely seen that he can get hit a lot on the return as well, right? Like he'll take some shots along the way. And the thing that scares me is Justin Gaethje hit him real hard one time and did get that brief little knockdown type reaction. Frankly, when I rewatched the fight, Gaethje landed harder than I remembered throughout the fight at times. But Gaethje is very defensively irresponsible. He comes back and forth, right? Like there was a point in his career where he just threw defense out the window. Then he started to rein it in a lot. And I feel like in the Holloway fight, he kind of went back and forth on that, right? Like he would have moments where he was trying to be defensive. And then whenever he would try and get back on offense, he just started taking a lot of risks. So I think of a guy like Ilia Topuria as a really difficult puzzle for guys to solve right now. If I'm in Max Holloway's corner, what am I looking to exploit? I'm looking to exploit the high kick vulnerability. What do we know about Ilia Topuria? If you're looking for like identifiable weaknesses, that is the one thing I think we can put on paper. It's like, we know that if you can kick this guy in the head, it can get to him. It can rattle him. He does not always see it coming. He does not always have his hands in the right position to block that. When you look at a guy like Max Holloway, doesn't get enough credit often for his kicks. He is a guy that is very clever with the kicks. Sometimes he gets a little too invested in the boxing. But when you look back, he's normally able to outbox people easily. So that's why he doesn't have to rely on the kicks. When he mixed in the kicks against Gaethje, they looked sensational, right? He landed big damaging shots, took him to the body with a couple of those big spin kicks. But also, you go back and look, when he dropped Volkanovski, which again, if people remember that whole trilogy, he dropped Volkanovski with what? A high kick, right? He was able to come up top with a high kick. I think he might have caught him as well with an uppercut on the counter. But if you look at Max, I think in the second fight with Volkanovski, he showed the best product that he had in a featherweight contest in a long time. And he still came up just short, right? And when you look at a guy like Ilia Topuria, and how you're going to have to get over on him. I think you're going to have a great performance. I think you're going to have to come in really smart. I think you're going to have to fight his ego, right? He said, I'm going to come out there, point to the center, and knock him out in the first 10 seconds. And I think that if you're Max Holloway, you're going to have to try and get him to chase you. You're going to have to try and poke, prod with the jab and try and get him to run onto something. I think you're going to have to try and intercept him up the middle with knees, with elbows, as well as with those big high kicks. I think that the spinning kick to the body, if used judiciously, could also be a tool here, but exposing your back to a guy like Ilia, I would not make a habit of doing. And ultimately, I think that this is a fascinating fight because I do think that counting out a guy like Max Holloway, right, giving him no chance to win is crazy because the guy has proven how many times that he is a big game player, that he can go out there and win, that he can go out there and compete with the best guys in the world, no matter who they are. And he's very difficult to finish, right? Been finished one time in professional mixed martial arts, and it was Dustin Poirier from a mounted triangle all these years ago. And when Dustin got a second crack at it, he wasn't able to put him away, right? So I think that you look at a guy like Max Holloway, and he gets nothing but my respect and admiration, win or lose in this fight. I think he's a great champion. I think he's an all-timer. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I just think this guy, Ilia Topuria, is the truth right now. I think he's got the goods to win the fight. And ultimately, I'm going to do a little more tape study, a little more due diligence. I'm going to wait and see where the line closes out. Right now, it's unplayable for me on the Ilia side at 70% indication. I just don't know how much wiggle room you really have there in terms of perceived value. But Max Holloway just came through with a massive underdog cash. And I will say, guys, I try not to be on public underdogs very often. And I think he kind of was a public underdog against Justin Gaethje before all was said and done. And the difference was I got it at plus 200, and it was very early in the week. And then you look at late in the week, it was plus 145 and some of these numbers. And I think people will be happy to go back to the well with Max Holloway. I think people don't like Ilia Topuria because he has a air of confidence that puts people off, right? There's a fine line between arrogance and, insane confidence. And this guy, Ilia Topuria, believes he can walk on water and do no wrong. So I think when you look at this guy, like there is a certain contingency in the fan base that would like to see him get served a slice of humble pie. But on the other side, I think that this guy has global, massive star appeal, right? When you look at a guy like Ilia Topuria and what he brings to the table, he's multilingual. He's a very, sellable, marketable guy to put on posters. He will talk shit. He will say what you need. He can go out there and blend in, with finer elements of society. Like the guy just has a certain classiness about him as well. So I think there's a lot that the UFC really likes about Ilia. I think they're happy to put him in a big spot and a big opportunity. I want to see the weight cut for Max Holloway and see how that progresses over the course of the week. If I had to, again, draw a small criticism, I do think Max looks a little bit drained early in the week to me, but again, I'm not there. It's not my weight cut. It's not my body. So who's to say how he's going to perform? But I don't like it. Just as a context, right? The things that people bring into the fight. I don't like him cutting back to 145 after the 155 fight. I thought he looked sensational there. I thought he should have stayed at that weight class and forced Ilia to come up and chase him, something like that, right? I thought he could have leveraged that win into almost anything. And to go back to 145, I think ultimately was a mistake. But to fight 155, what are you going to fight Islam Makhachev? Like Topuria is probably the more beatable of the two for Max Holloway. So I think that for that reason, I guess I understand the logic if his goal is just to get back to that UFC undisputed belt. But I don't think either one of those guys is easy pickings right now, right? I think both of these guys are killers. I'm talking about Makhachev and Topuria. I think both these guys are very well-rounded. They're talented on the feet, but they could take you down, mix it up in the wrestling and the grappling department as well. So there's no easy outs in the championship level. And I do think that Ilia Topuria, last time out, he left no doubt. He went out there and absolutely claimed the title. He knocked out Volkanovski and made it abundantly clear that he was the deserving champion. But now he's got to defend it, and that it's not against a challenger. It's not against some guy on the come up. It's against a seasoned, proven UFC elite veteran that is a former champion of this weight class. So I just think this is a fascinating, fantastic fight. And my lean is towards Ilia Topuria. I think Max Holloway has a path late in the fight if he's able to stay alive early, force Ilia to exchange later on in the fight, try and take him out with that head kick. I think those are his paths. But ultimately, I just think Max Holloway, his normal on-paper advantages are minimized in this contest, and he's going to have to use the jab and the volume and leverage that and dictate the range that this fight takes place. Because if Ilia is able to crash the pocket, I think he hits too hard for most people to get hit by. And I also think he's got options to try and mix in some takedowns. And Max is historically extremely difficult to take down. But, you know, I think we've also seen guys like Bryce Mitchell have a lot of success in the wrestling and grappling until they go against this guy. And then he's able to get back on top of them. He's able to put them in the spin cycle and, you know, leverage that physicality. So I'm super impressed by this fight. I think that in terms of the best fights the UFC could make, this is right up there for me in terms of what I want to watch as a fan, in terms of what I want to see booked. These are two great fighters. There's simply nothing better we could say. So I'm super excited about this one, guys. Let me know in the comment section down below who you guys are betting on, who you guys like. I have cashed in on both these guys in their last two fights. So it's just like, damn, do I really want to try and, you know, fade one of my guys right now? I don't know about that. Liam, what do you make of this talk Ilia is doing, potentially looking for the finish in the first 10 seconds of round one? Are you buying into that, or is he just trying to sell the fight? I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. I do think that Ilia believes he can knock him out in the first round. You know, I think he believed that about Volk. I think Volk is a little bit more of a strategist. And honestly, I think that's why Volk beat Max Holloway 3 times, right? I think he's just better at strategizing for fights. I think Max is really good at executing in fights. I think he's really good at running up the score against guys he's better than. No doubt about that, right? Like Calvin Kattar is still recovering from that ass whooping. But when you look at what Max maybe struggles with, I think that you saw Volkanovski make the better in-fight adjustments. And here's the other thing I'll mention. Volkanovski has a similar kind of body type to a guy like Topuria, right? Where he takes very hard, you know, like here's the difference, I guess. Ilia Topuria, his low kicks are super committed, right? He throws with 100% intensity. Volk will go, he'll just go inside, outside, touch, but he just scores, right? He scores all night. So in terms of his point scoring ability, Volk is really, really good at putting up points on the board. And that's why against Max, a guy who's hard to kill, Volk had a good style for beating him. Ilia is not bad at putting points up on the board, right? Like ask Josh Emmett, he beat his ass. He hurt him physically throughout the contest, but also he put the points up on the board that he needed to all night. I do think that in this fight, you know, what makes it a little different is I do think Ilia is going to try and knock him out. I do think Ilia is going to try and become a huge star in this fight. But if he doesn't get that going and he ends up needing to try and wrestle or grapple, then I think he's going to do that too. Like, I don't think he's going to just fall in love with his hands and say, you know, I'm going to die on my shield if that's what it takes. But I think we've also seen when this guy needs to bite down on the gum shield, like, y'all don't want to be standing in front of him. Stephen Goncalves or whatever kicked him in the head, and then Ilia sent him to hell. And then you look back, Ilia gets dropped by Jai Herbert, stands back up, and then sends the guy to Hades with a combination to the body and the head that will make you sick. It is absolutely sensational. So I think that you look at this guy, he's a handful early. My guy Glenbot asks, if he goes full tilt early, how do you think he'll look in the later rounds? I think it's an open question, right? I don't think anybody can fight their hardest for 25 minutes. But I think when you look at a guy like Ilia, he has shown when he was on short notice, he went a hard 15 against Youssef Zalal and he gutted it out. And I think that when we saw him go against, what's his name? Josh Emmett, he looked prepared for 5 rounds there. But Max Holloway, different pace, right? Different energy, a little bit more elite, a little bit more well-rounded. So I think that's really important to note. I will be cheering for Max as he's my favorite all time, but my money will be on Ilia. Shout out to you, my brother. Good luck. You got what we call the sadness hedge going. Shout out to JR, says, good morning, Liam. Good morning to you. Feel like Ilia's ego will not allow him to grapple Max. I don't know. I think that his ego is constructed around winning. I don't know if it's constructed around boxing. Max looks much improved since the Volkan Yair fights, fighting a lot smarter. I think that's fair enough. Also, I just want to shout out Gracie Technics. Max has a great team, right? So both these guys have a great team. They have great coaching staffs. They're going to try and come in with good game plans here. But from what I've seen, I just trust the game planning ever so slightly more on the Ilia Topuria side. And that's where I'm going to lean towards his way. Next up, guys, we've got a similar price tag. We got Khamzat Chimaev sitting at about a minus 245 favorite, taking on number 3 ranked Robert Whittaker. Again, we've got a guy who's looking to prove himself a little bit more against a former champion that's looking to get back to where they once were. And for Robert Whittaker, he couldn't have done it much better against Ikram Aleksandr. Absolutely demonstrated his value, right? He went out there and exposed Ikram Aleksandrov's chin. Granted, we will say Khamzat Chimaev did that first, if you look back in the day. But Robert Whittaker shows that he continues to be a big game player in this middleweight division. The guy has a lot of wins. The guy's been very difficult for guys to get over on. He lost to, very talented fighters, the very best in the world, champions, and otherwise he's been aces, right? And when you look at a guy like Khamzat Chimaev, as much as I've loved and respected Chimaev's game along the way, I've been a little bit disappointed by the infrequency of activity, right? He's 30 years of age now. So let a little bit of time pass him by. He's 7-0 inside of the octagon, but he has not competed since October of last year, right? So he's now out of the octagon for just about a year, and he's coming back in, and we've got Robert Whittaker, that is looking to continue his, path back to the title, right? A former champion. He's 17-5 in the UFC. I mean, that's a fantastic record. There's simply nothing to sneeze at in that record, guys. 17-5. He fought in the welterweight division and the middleweight divisions. His only losses at middleweight, guys, Israel Adesanya ×2, and the decision the second time at least had some controversy to it. I think Izzy won it pretty cleanly, but there was people on the night that weren't happy with the decision. And then he lost to Dricus du Plessis. I bet on Dricus du Plessis as a plus 300 underdog. Even I didn't expect it to look quite like that. Du Plessis went out there and dominated on the ground, took him down when he needed to. And that is the sign that's not good, right, coming into this fight. The difference between Chimaev and du Plessis is nobody expected du Plessis to try and take down Robert Whittaker. And it was, in fact, Robert Whittaker who initiated the clinch. If you go back and look, Robert Whittaker wasn't loving how he was doing in the striking exchanges. He was having some success, but you kept seeing du Plessis start to get a little closer in the pocket. So he said, you know what, I'm going to grab a hold of this guy. And when he went to do that, Dricus du Plessis, the physicality was way different, man. He just sent him flying. And once he got him to the ground, he just beat him up, assaulted him. And then they went back to the feet in round 2. And I just didn't see the same Robert Whittaker there. It was almost like the Israel Adesanya, the first fight, right, where he got knocked out. It looked like after round 1, the lights were on and nobody was home. He got beat up and gashed about the face. The elbows were dropping heavy, and he looked like he was all sorts of uncomfortable. So I don't think he likes being on the bottom position. I don't think he likes getting put underneath these guys. And I think that his win condition in this fight for me is keeping the fight upright. He's got to sprawl. He's got to brawl. He's got to keep this guy off of his legs. He's got to make sure that he D's up, the major positions of Chimaev in the first round. I do think Chimaev is a guy that, it sounds like he's taking his training seriously. I watched some videos on Chimaev. It seems like he's bringing in, former Russian national team members in the wrestling and bringing them in as both sparring partners and as like coaches, right? Like bringing in a real sophisticated coaching program, working on his cardio, working on his recovery. But I just have some doubts about where his health is at. He's been a guy that struggled to make it to the octagon healthy. He's been a guy that has been sidelined by, mental health and a bunch of different things, by what he said today. He's dealing with depression. He was dealing with a bunch of different stuff, and we wish him nothing but the best there, right? That's nothing that we're poking fun at, but we're just looking at a guy in Chimaev who's being priced as a very substantial favorite here against a former champion. And he's a very good wrestler. He's a very good takedown artist. If you look back, Khamzat Chimaev, I have a tape study on Khamzat Chimaev that's about 10 pages long in my weekly, document for this week. I made it a long time ago when Chimaev was on the come up, but there's a breakdown of his wrestling match that he did with Jack Hermanson. And he was able to put 6 points on the board against Jack Hermanson very quickly, right? Just like threw him around, made it look like it was easy, just ragdolled Jack Hermanson, who's a big, strong guy, typically speaking, for the middleweight division and quite a good grappler. But what was a little bit interesting here is, after that first period, he was up about 6-0. I think the match ended 6-0, like off the top of my memory. I just don't know that this guy Chimaev has the gas tank to push his own style for more than 15 minutes. Let's go ahead and take a look at Tapology and see if this fight, wow. Yeah, guys, this fight is scheduled for 5-minute rounds. So for me, we knew that Ilia Topuria can go 5 rounds. We saw the Josh Emmett fight. But can he go 5 with Max? I think that's still an open question. In this fight, do we know that Khamzat Chimaev can go 5 rounds? I want to assume that he can. I want to assume that he's making the right professional decisions to be able to do that. But can I guarantee that? Can I bank on that with a guy who's hardly making it to the scales and everything? I don't know about all that. A guy like Robert Whittaker, even though he's not a perfect fighter, he's kind of the picture of consistency. You sort of know what you're going to get with Robert Whittaker. He's a dangerous guy on the feet. If you mess with him on the feet, he's going to give himself chances. You can hurt him on the feet, but he's not an easy guy to put away. He's a tough guy. You're going to have to really break him down. You're going to have to drop him a couple of times or really beat him up on the ground. You're going to have to do something to really get him out of the fight. Otherwise, he's going to stay in the fight. And he's a guy that's skilled in every position, right? He understands how to wrestle. He understands the fundamentals. He understands how to grapple. Both these guys have competed in the welterweight division, right? So that's not unique to Robert Whittaker in this case. So what makes it so fascinating is they're scheduled 5-minute rounds, but you think that Chimaev's basically a front-loaded finisher, right? But that front-loaded finish equity, it's definitely something you got to contend with. If you look back at the Kamaru Usman fight, guys, I really thought Chimaev had him dead to rights. He's on his back. I had predicted a submission in the first round. He's looking for the rear naked choke. I think it was a standing back take. And Usman falls forward really hard, right? The one thing that I think maybe people miss about that is that Chimaev falls onto his hand and his wrist. And it looked to me like he hurt his hand and his wrist there. And then he was never able to attempt another choke again throughout the rest of the fight. So the guy really struggles, in my view, when things start to go a little bit sideways. Whether it's the Gilbert Burns fight like Pick'em MMA is talking about here, or whether it's the Usman fight. When it gets out of the first 5 minutes and you're still there and you still want to be there and you're not just going to go away, it looks like Chimaev has a lot harder time. It's one thing when you're fighting the leech and you can just pick the guy up, run him, off the mat, take him over to Dana White, tell him what time it is. That's a different thing when you're at 170 than when you're at 185 against these guys like Robert Whittaker, who are not easy to take down. You see guys like Yoel Romero struggle to take Robert Whittaker down. You see guys, like Duplessis was able to take him down, but it was kind of a weird throw and a weird situation and position. So I think that the truth is, if Chimaev's able to get him down early, this could just be a Chimaev destruction. We did see Robert Whittaker end up in those horrible positions against Duplessis. And I think that Chimaev is really technically good at wrestling. I think he knows what he's doing. I think he has an idea of how to take people down, how to break people down. He grabs the far wrist. He rides you down to the ground. He uses one hook in. He starts beating you up. And when you look at that guy, he's just very hard to deal with. He's a guy who's very big. And he does have a a good frame for the division, right? He's 6'2" compared to just 6 foot for Robert Whittaker. He's 75-inch reach compared to 73.5-inch for Whittaker. And he's also the younger fighter. So all the anthropomorphic advantage here are checking the boxes for a guy like Khamzat Chimaev. And I do think we could definitely see a potential robbery split decision for Chimaev. I think that's absolutely an important note, and I'll talk about why. Khamzat has shown manageable cardio even when tired. Calling him gassy is lazy. It's really not lazy, Josh. If you go back and look at the fights, was he as effective in round 2 and 3 against Usman as he was in round 1? No. So is that lazy or is that analytical? That's just analytical. I also mentioned the fact that he had a wrist injury. I don't know if you heard that part, but that's what I talked about. I talked about in round 1, he looked great, then he fell over the top. Then how about the Gilbert Burns fight, where he said after the fact, that guy was tougher than I thought. I agreed with him. But also in round 1, he looked very good. And then in rounds 2 and 3, things start to get a little dicey again, right? It's like this guy is very, very dominant in the first round. I don't know if anybody would dispute that. But I do think that when you look, having manageable cardio to barely eke out a draw or a 29-28 close and controversial decision over Usman, that's a lot different than I smash everybody, I kill everybody, take them down and finish them in the first round. This is a different story, right? 29-28, smash everybody, kill everybody. It's like you just got to have a lane there. So I appreciate the support and I appreciate the comment, but it's not lazy. It's analytical. And I think that if you go back and look, the tape will tell you the same thing. Khamzat Chimaev in the first round doesn't lose, right? He wins the first round almost all the time. The question is what happens next? And the question in this fight is if he doesn't finish Whittaker early, which Whittaker is not easy to finish, but he can be finished. Not true. He has won round 3s against good fighters. All right, name them. Let's be quick about it. Tell me who. Apparently, Chimaev came in sick against Usman. Here's my whole thing, guys. What's to say he's not going to come in sick this time? Last time he pulled out of the fight, he was sick. So I'm picking Chimaev. I'm leaning towards Chimaev. Last time they booked this fight, I picked Chimaev. But do I have concerns about his health? Yeah. Yes, I do. Josh, honestly, brother, I don't know why you're being combative and unhelpful this morning, but your commentary has been unwelcome, to say the least. But it's just a guy in Robert Whittaker. What does he bring to the table? He brings to the table excellent uppercuts, right? We saw that against Ikram Aleksandr. Oh my gosh. A knockout against Ikram Aleksandr, that's just the icing on the cake, right? You look at the knockouts he's had throughout his career, put down Derek Brunson, put down a lot of really good fighters. You look at a guy like Nate, says up early today, let's go. Absolutely. But a guy like Aleksandr, he was, in my opinion, blinded by the lights, right? I don't think he even showed the best version of himself against Whittaker. He kind of came out there looking like he was not ready for prime time, right? Then you look at the fight prior to that, the Paulo Costa fight. Where is Paulo Costa at right now? Like, I don't know if he's even a top guy. Like, is he a top 10 middleweight? I think that would be presumptuous, right? He hasn't proven it recently. Like, what has he done to prove that he's a top guy? In my view, not very much. So I thought he was going to have a chance against Robert, and he went out there and didn't really throw a ton and wasn't very aggressive and wasn't very assertive, didn't really give himself the best chance to win. You look at the Duplessis fight. Again, Duplessis did a ton of damage, but Robert's been a guy that's shown multi-layers, skills in all positions. He's a tough guy to get one over on. And the guys that have done it are all champions. So do I think Chimaev has a championship ceiling? Yes, absolutely. Do I think that, it was easier at 170 than 185? I do. I thought, would it have been easier if he had gotten to Izzy when he was still the champ than trying to go through a guy like Duplessis who actually knows how to grapple as well? I do. So for me, Chimaev still has a lot to prove. And it was one thing when he was training at All-Stars in Sweden and he was known for having the best work ethic in the room and everybody loved how much he trained. And then it was a whole different thing when it was every time he tries to ramp up his training, he gets sick. So now he hasn't been ramping up his training as much and he's having a hard time. He's missing weight. The other things that we have we haven't mentioned, right? It's like, what about the weird weight miss against Nate Diaz? They try and set him up against an elder, right? And basically give Nate the boot out the door, and then he doesn't make the weight, right? He misses the weight by a substantial margin. So what happens if they had just canceled that fight because of the weight miss, right? Good thing they had that 180-pound catch weight. That worked out really well. But you just look, the fight career of Khamzat Chimaev has just not been a clear indication of a linear progression. Like, oh, this guy's getting better each time out. It's almost like I was way more hyped when it was all the great first round finishes and we had these question marks than I was when he looked very human, right? Against Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman, he looked very human. I think that most people agreed if the fight had went 5 with Kamaru, it wouldn't have gone his way, right? It was trending in the wrong direction. And P. Diddy, ironically in the chat, says, I think Khamzat's immune system will affect his cardio. That's the kind of thing where, do I want to try and play pretend that I'm a doctor? No, I don't. I really can't cap that in. But we always have to talk about what could go wrong. And in my opinion, there's a lot that could go wrong at minus 245. So I'm not advocating the Rob play. If you guys look, I've never lost more money fading a fighter than Rob Whittaker. Okay. So I'm like the number one Rob hater in the world in terms of like dollars lost trying to prove that this guy isn't the one. So in terms of my track record, guys, fade me, right? If I think Rob's going to win, then bet the other side. Like, I just fade my opinions on Robert Whittaker. However, I don't think he's a dead duck in this fight, right? I think more often than not, Chimaev should go out there and run through him and finish him. Here's going to be the Narrative Nation take, okay? The one thing that I always talk about that I find a lot of people don't try and bring up, this is something that I think is a interesting note, to say the least. Kadyrov is a guy who is the Chechen dictator, right? And Khamzat Chimaev has to like report to this guy, okay? So Khamzat Chimaev's always posting pictures with Ramzan Kadyrov, and he's training his sons, and he's got his sons in the corner for his fights and all these kind of things, okay? Ramzan Kadyrov is a power broker in this part of the world, right? He goes to these events. Everybody was talking about Better Bivol. Oh, like, is that a rigged card? Oh my God, Kadyrov's in the ring when they're raising, Better Beef's hand, right? All I'm saying is this. When you look at guys that are really powerful and really dangerous, right? Like, talk about money influencing fights. That's one thing. Talk about, I'll cut your head off. Like, it's like, yeah, these guys play a little different. And I'm not saying that they're going to threaten Robert Whittaker or something like this. But when I'm talking about, the idea of fading these guys that are affiliated with really powerful people that are dangerous, like warlord type people out there, I do not like to get into that business very often. So when the stars line up that you can find a good betting opportunity, and Muhammad Naimov is a big underdog against Nathaniel Wood, and it's in the desert, that's a good opportunity. You go out there and you just take the risk and hope for the best. But in a fight like this, Khamzat Chimaev is one of the guys that can fight in the UAE and can't fight in a lot of other places. All right. So location matters. Max Holloway and Ilia Topuria, guys, they could run that anywhere in the world, but it's a travel destination. People can come from Spain. They can come from Georgia. They can come from anywhere they want. The USA, right? And come get a ticket and go watch this show, right? But a lot of the people are going to be rich people from the area, right? And when you look, just look at how the card is constructed, all right? We're going to switch it over to Tapology for a second, and we're going to just do a quick exercise to try and illustrate my point. And I did mention we're going to go a little bit quicker through some of these other fights on the first look. So the main and the co-main, I just wanted to give the full depth and credit that they deserve. And shout out to Ryan, says the morning show is nice. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the support. Shout out to our guy here. Shout out to Josh, says Khamzat still got Usman down in round 3. Usman is a 170 pounder. Okay. And he has knees that haven't worked in 5 years. That's the truth. Okay. And Usman is not successfully out wrestling other people. at this point in his career. If you go back and look through the data, not very successful. He's pushing them against the fence. You know who took him down in round 1? Leon Edwards. You know who said he was going to get taken down in round 1? Me. I think I know my wrestling pretty well. His knees are non-existent. I agree with you, Joe. So I think when you look, like, everything is context-based, Josh. And if you look at a guy like a former welterweight champion on short notice up at 185, and he can out-wrestle that guy just enough to win the fight very closely on thin margins, like, yeah, God bless him for it. Is that the same as Robert Whittaker? Honestly, you book Usman and what's his name? You book Usman and Robert Whittaker right now at 185. Who wins? I don't know. Maybe it's a really close fight. I have a feeling that, that would be a tough fight for Usman because Whittaker's got pretty damn good takedown defense. He'll punch your head off. So I don't know. I think that'd be a tough fight. Shout out to our guy Pick'em for the donation. I appreciate you. He says that we are on fire this morning. We're trying to keep the fire rolling, my man. Thank you so much for the support. And ultimately, guys, I'm trying to just show love and respect to both these athletes, right? I try and tell it like it is while also being respectful. And I think that they're both great fighters. I think that the guy who's undefeated probably deserves a slight nod at the window. But when you talk about should he be 70% to beat a guy who's very well-rounded, who's very skilled, who shows up prepared every time, who, by the way, if it was a wrestling tournament won by forfeit the last time these two guys were matched up, right? The other guy couldn't make the walk. This guy made the walk against his backup and sent him to the land of wind and ghosts instantly. So I just have to take my hat off to Robert Whittaker at a certain point. He's all confidence. He's all courage. He's got no compunction about going out there and fighting this guy. And I would think that if anything, that pullout last time only built his confidence here. But on the other side, you have the confidence of an undefeated fighter. You have a guy who has the exact same win over Ikram Alaskarov on his shelf that he can always dust off and make shiny whenever he needs a nice highlight reel. And if you look at what he's done in the UFC, he's been nothing short of dominant in the fights where he was supposed to. And in the fights that were supposed to be close, they turned out to be pretty damn close, but he kept on, finding a way to win. And in this one, maybe it turns out to be really close, but he just finds a way to win, and he shows those levels up in conditioning that we need to see over 5 rounds. But it's an assumption that he can go for 5. It's an assumption that he could do it against the best guy, arguably, that he's fought so far in the UFC at a 70% clip. So I think that he should probably be favored here, but I think it's a little price prohibitive for me. Shout out to our guy, Nate Brown, as well. Liam, have Pick'em MMA for bets and banter sometimes. I would love to. Pick'em, if I'm not following you already, do you have a Twitter? Let's go check and make sure that we're followed up with our guy Pick'em. And speaking of which, guys, if you are not, oh, hell yeah, we are following each other. And so I'm going to send a message now and say bets and banter soon. If I don't do it now, I will forget. But shout out to you, Nate, and I appreciate the dono. Hey, he's doing a show with our friend of the show, Jewish Better, tonight. Can't wait. Hey, love to see that. And we're always looking to help people in the community grow. So if you're a good guy, if you're trying to help people, if you're putting out good information, if you're being accountable, third-party tracked, and the like, then guys, go ahead and get at me on Twitter, on social media, in the comment section down below. If you're interested in being a guest at some point on the program, and you never know, your name could get called next. We just had our guy Keith 3 Picks on. A lot of people had some positive feedback in the comment section. I'm always curious what you guys think. We've done, I don't even know, probably 50, 60 plus guests over the course of this show. And I'm always looking to continue to add to our roster, but we want to keep it quality as well, right? We want to make sure that we're sharing good information and always keeping ourselves accountable. So you can find all my bets third-party track for the last however many years at betmma.tips/Liam-Heslin. All my stuff is tracked down below as well. But if you guys are ever looking for my information, whatever, it's always down in the information box. And I appreciate the support. I appreciate the suggestions. And I appreciate each and every one of you guys that have ever been on the show before as a guest. The friends of the show are what make the show. And shout out to the sharpest chat in the game. We've got people listening in as they're working. We got people listening in as they're going to class. We got people that I hope are listening in as they're drinking their morning cup of coffee. Salute to you guys. A cup of Joe for each one of us. And we're on to the next one, guys. We're on the featured bout on the main card. Let's go back over to the UFC website. because they've got this nice little clean interface. We've got the number 1 ranked light heavyweight, Magomed Ankalaev, taking on Aleksandr Rakic, number 5, the Rocket. I got to say, Aleksandr Rakic is a guy that definitely has skill. He's definitely scary in terms of his power. He's got the big knockout ability, but he's a front-loaded finisher if I've ever seen one. I think he's got 1 or 2 finishes outside of the first round. The 2 finishes outside of the first round are against Marcin Prachnio and somebody else on the Austrian regional scene. Right. If you look at his losses, he lost to Volkan Ozdemir via split decision, which is totally fair play. But then his wins, Justin Ledet, not a meaningful win. Devin Clark, I believe he's been cut from the promotion. He was a sub 500 UFC light heavyweight with decent wrestling. And honestly, in that fight, Devin Clark hit him with a big punch, then got passed through on a pull by, and then just got pounded out on the ground. It was a completely ridiculous fight. In any case, you then look at the Anthony Smith fight, and he got the win there. Impressive enough. He just kicked his legs out. The Thiago Santos fight, it was a close fight. Got the win there. I think he out-wrestled him, if my memory serves. Then the Jan Blachowicz fight, obviously inconsequential, kind of a non-factor. Set his career back for a long time, though, guys. He was out from 2022 to 2024. He came back. He looked good against Yuri early. He was winning the first round, and then it all fell apart. For me, here's the problem. I think that he has a chance to win this fight because it's light heavyweight, right? Anything can happen when 2 big guys start swinging leather. You look at Rakic, he looks big. He looks the part, right? He's got the big torso. He's got the big build. I just don't think that he's got the heart, right? I don't think he's got the gumption. I don't think he wants it as bad as some other guys do. And you look at Magomed Ankalaev, and you could definitely nitpick, right? He went out there, he got submitted by Paul Craig, right? It's just not a great loss, right? But if you look throughout his career, the guy's pretty damn good. He wins a lot of rounds that he takes part in. And when he loses rounds, they're typically very close rounds. They're typically rounds where maybe he just doesn't get off on enough volume, doesn't let it go enough. I think when you see this guy land with his hands, he's extremely dangerous. He's got power in his hands. I don't know if these new gloves are going to make sure that nobody ever gets a knockout again in the UFC. But if you just go back and watch Magomed Ankalaev against Iwan Cutelaba, it's the funniest 2-fight series in UFC history, guys, because the first fight is the most ridiculous early stoppage you'll ever see, where Iwan Cutelaba inexplicably is going like this and just acting like he's hurt, even though he's not. And then the referee jumps in to intervene way too early. It was absolutely insane. And then Cutelaba is now having to explain to the referee that he was faking it. It was completely ridiculous, right? But then they ran it back. And guys, Magomed Ankalaev hit him so hard that I think that if he could have done it all over again, he would have just taken the early stoppage and been done with it. It was like a year out of both of their careers, and Magomed Ankalaev served him the most violent knockout you will ever see. So I think when you look at Ankalaev's highlights, he is a dangerous, dangerous man. He front kicked Dalcha and Bula out of his socks. He can hit people very hard with his punches. And we've also seen when he needs to mix in the wrestling, he can mix in the wrestling. For me, I saw Aleksandr Rakic last time with 7 minutes of fight enthusiasm. I've seen this guy go out there and gas out before. I've seen him go out there and lose close rounds before. So in a 15-minute fight, I guess it's anybody's ball game early, but I trust Ankalaev to have more paths to victory. I trust Ankalaev to be the guy who's got cardio deeper into the fight. Let's go back and talk about, the theme, right? In terms of, I mentioned before, the theme of the UAE type cards. Let's go back and look at this. All right. Let's go back and take a peek at the Tapology card, and we'll have to zoom in. And now we're going to talk fight through each fight real quick, just to talk about the flag. Okay. Khamzat Chimaev, legal citizenship, guys, is UAE. He changed his legal citizenship to the UAE because he did not have a permanent residency in Sweden. So he left All-Stars Gym and he started doing his thing in the UAE. And then he had problems with his lungs from being in air conditioning too much. All that's true. You guys can go check that for yourself. In any case, then you've got the Russian Magomed Ankalaev. Okay. And guys, Magomed Ankalaev, let's go ahead and pull this up, right? I can't zoom anymore. So now what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to pull up a separate tab. And I want you guys to see this, okay? And y'all need to look at something for me. Here we go. So now let's go ahead and share this tab instead. And I hope you guys can see this, okay? Right? That's Magomed Ankalaev. All right? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at Magomed Ankalaev. And now we're going to go Ramzan Kadyrov. Do you guys notice anything? These guys look very similar. They look super Russian. And I'm telling you guys, if they look like Ramzan Kadyrov, it's not that you can't fade them. You're just going to want to pick very carefully. You're going to want to pick very carefully among your crop of Ramzan Kadyrov-esque fighters, aligned fighters that you're going to want to fade on these cards, okay? And again, it's a fight. The UFC can only do so much. They set up these events, but I'll tell you what, when you don't want to let down your corporate business partner, that's a lot different than not wanting to let these guys down, right? You don't want to let these guys down because you want to make sure everything's all hunky-dory and they don't try and kill your kids or something, okay? And I'm not trying to be coy about any of this. I'm not trying to be silly about any of this. These people are dangerous and they're for real. So I'll leave it there because I don't want anybody to, hunt me down. But in any case, you look at Lerone Murphy, right? And, he's unaffiliated, right? But guy who has a crazy backstory you could look into yourself. Then you look at Shara Magomedov, and the guy is basically forced to fight out of the UAE, right? If they asked Dana White, they're like, are we going to see this guy fight in the US? And he came to the US. If you guys remember, he tried to do a little press tour, little press stint, and then it didn't work out. Then they've got our guy, Armen Petrosyan, here on the other side, right? Then you've got Ibo Aslan, right? Then you scroll down. You got Myktybek Orolbai. You've got, Abu Magomedov. He kind of looks a little Russian too, despite the German flag. That's an interesting thing. Okay. Then we've got Farid Basharat. I believe he's managed by Dominance MMA. Ismail Nardiev got the call back to the UFC, trains out of Morocco. And then Rinat Fakhretdinov. How about this guy? Does he look any, could you look more Russian than this guy? Him and Ankalaev. Pretty Russian looking guys. It's crazy you said that, but I heard similar stories to that when other fighters and athletes say similar things. Liam, are you buying into the conspiracy that the UFC is flying out judges to potentially give a robbery decision to Rakic to avoid giving the Poatan fight next? It's tricky, man, because honestly, I think that they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? You got to understand this. Number one, the UFC could do whatever the hell they want. So that belt is a gimmick that they give out at their discretion. So if Magomed Ankalaev wins 68 more fights, they still don't have to give him shit. That's the truth. Here's the other thing. When you look back, Ferreira has these other options, right? He could go up to heavyweight. He could try and, move around a little bit. They definitely want to elongate the run as long as they can. But the age is going to come to a point where, it's not going to make business sense for them to protect them at a certain point either. For Ankalaev, I'll show you guys something because you guys are rocking with me early in the morning and I appreciate your support. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this with you guys and you guys will have an idea of the social media numbers that we're dealing with. And if you guys want to see the A-sides for every fight, you could sign up to be a channel member or you could sign up for Patreon. But what I will show you is this right here, which is the social media accounts rank ordered. And why would they be promoting Khamzat Chimaev? I could tell you guys, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a genius, right? 8.2 million followers for Khamzat Chimaev, and he's never fought for the UFC belt. He's 7-0 in the promotion. This guy, he's got the backing of the promotion behind him. Okay. Then you've got Ilia Topuria, 4.7 million. This guy has blown up as a star, but he was a star. He was an A-side compared to Volk before they fought. Max Holloway, obviously a huge champion, a guy that they respect. Robert Whittaker, former champion, but there he is, guys. Number 5 on the list. None other than Magomed Ankalaev. And what does he need? Big win, big card, breakthrough. That's what they're looking for, right? Like if they can get Ankalaev to be somebody that average UFC fans care about seeing, then they're more than happy to set up that fight, in my opinion. But the reason they're hesitant to set that up is Magomed Ankalaev can't draw flies to crap right now. And in part because the Jan Blachowicz fight just was a stinker, right? It main evented the card, and it was so bad and so inconclusive. Like the one thing combat sports fans pay for, guys, whether we acknowledge this or not, the one thing that we really want, and Chael Sonnen talks about this all the time, is conflict resolution, right? We want a conflict, and then we want a conflict resolution. And we didn't get it, right? That was his whole job. Like, go out there and beat Jan Blachowicz. And he didn't get a conflict resolution. And that very night, Dana White was like, we're booking Glover Teixeira and Jamal Hill. Like, we're just taking you guys out and plugging in 2 new guys and keeping the belt. That was the way it worked, right? So you look at a guy like Ankalaev, and you can understand why the UFC's been frustrated. The guy clearly has so much skill and talent, but he doesn't always finish. He doesn't always put his foot on the gas. Like he's kind of just left things, in the balance sometimes where he could have went out there and probably taken down a lot of these guys and finished them if he wanted to. He's like messing around on the feet. So, I don't think Magomed Ankalaev is going to win like a Rhodes Scholar. He's not going to be the highest scorer on a test, maybe, right? But I think that the guy's fighting is very, very good. I think that if you just look at how the guy fights, he finds a way to do it very successfully, and he's got a lot of physical tools, well-rounded abilities. And I just think he could do it for longer, right? Like, let's say Magomed Ankalaev gasses at the 12.5-minute mark. I think Rakic gasses at the 7-minute mark, right? So I just don't like that to back somebody. Here's the other thing. What discernible skill did Yuri Prohaska have that was better than Aleksandr Rakic, guys? And I'll wait because he didn't have one. But I picked, I believe, let me go back and check because I never want to speak out of turn here. So let's go Yuri Prohaska and see the write-up that I did for that fight. And we'll pull it up on screen so you guys can see it as well. Okay? But let's go back to it. This is at UFC 300, and we've got... Here we go. Yuri Prohaska, Aleksandr Rakic, and we called Yuri as an underdog that night. Minus 105, minus 115, right? So a virtual pick 'em, but I think he was like plus 115 early in the week. And what did I say overall? Prohaska is not a very process-oriented fighter, but he is dangerous in every phase. He is a dangerous threat on offense, and he has a never-say-die attitude. Unless Rakic can land a signature head kick to shut off Yuri, incapacitate him with low kicks, or grind him out for 15 minutes with takedowns, I think he will be getting backed up with pressure and insane blitzes, and he will eventually capitulate to the Czech samurai. That's a very intentional word. Capitulate. Give up. Fold. Break. And I think, unfortunately, that is his fatal flaw. He has a good skill set. The guy looks good. He looks the part. He's got the, one round of fury. He's got all these first round finishes. But if you extend it a little bit longer, if you take it deeper into the fight, you don't have it. He don't want it, and he'll give up. And if you do that against Ankalaev, I think he'll beat you. I think he'll do it to the raucous support of the crowd. And I think the UFC would be happy to book him into bigger fights if he can get that whole audience behind him, if he can get everybody saying his name, if he can get everybody saying that's the guy to beat Ferreira. That's how you get across from him, is if you get interest. No one cares about Ankalaev, so he needs to do something. And I think they're giving him an opportunity against the guy who used to be somebody they wanted to build up. Then he had a major knee injury, and they brought him back from a 2-year layoff to fight a former champion that needed a win on the bounce. Take that for whatever it's worth. I don't think they're setting up Rakic for success, but I think they're in a no-lose situation, and this is sometimes what people miss about the UFC. Imagine I set up this guy that I need him to either do something really impressive and have a breakout moment, right? Or I get this other guy who turns out to be really talented. So think about it like Nick Piccinini on the Contender Series. This guy's brought back. You need to do something special. But then Nick Piccinini loses the fight, and we find out Louis Garule is the truth. This guy deserved to be here. Tough run of luck. We'll bring you back next year. We'll see you again. Right? It's just he needed to do something special. It was impossible to do something special against this guy. This guy was the truth. So that's the kind of thing where Aleksandr Rakic, like, how does he reestablish himself? He goes out there and kicks this guy's head off. Like, that's how he does it. But for me, if he doesn't get it done early, I think he's getting run up and done up badly. And I just trust Ankalaev more here. I think he's going to have more confidence fighting in the UAE than Rakic. Rakic coming off a KO loss. This guy coming off of, a lot more positive results. So I think Ankalaev's going to put him in a box, honestly. As Rakic has done to others before, I think this time it might be happening to him. I think he might get put in the box this time. All right, guys. With that being said, let's go back to the A-side report just as our little background screen here. And in fact, we'll move back to the UFC website. All right, guys. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk Lerone Murphy and Dan Ige, 50K Ige. Fun fight. A little bit surprised by the odds. When you look back, Lerone Murphy, I don't think he's ever lost as a favorite. So one other document that I make on a weekly basis, the A-side report that you guys were looking at before, as well as the previous performance and odds range. This is in addition to all the write-ups that I do. I write up every fight that's on the card each and every week. But when you look at the previous performance and odds range, you definitely learn some interesting things here. Now, there's a few fighters here that are fighters that have undefeated trends, okay? And undefeated trends just meaning, it's not one fight, right? But they've had multiple fights, over 3 fights, and they've never lost in this odds category, right? So that means if they're a favorite this time, then they've never lost as a favorite. If they're a dog this time, then they've never lost as a dog. That's an undefeated trend, right? And I'm going to show you guys what the undefeated trends are today. And I tweeted it out earlier that people could unlock them, but we were getting slow progress. So now the people that are the benefactors ultimately are the fine folks that are watching this stream live with me this morning. And I'm just going to ask, as I show you the undefeated trends, you guys can screenshot this, whatever you want to do. You can take this information for whatever it's worth. If you don't think it's worth anything, then that's fine. You just throw it out. You don't have to include it in your process. But if you find it helpful, if you find it valuable, go ahead and throw a thumbs up on the video. Go ahead and get subscribed to the channel because I'm here to try and help the good guys win, whether you're with me or against me, tail fade or indifferent. I'm always trying to share valuable information that can help other people win on their bets. So that's why I talk about the fights from both perspectives. That's why I talk about some of the things like trends that if you guys watch content about any other sport, and especially betting on any other sport, they talk about trends. They talk about how people have done in the past. They talk about people's performance against the odds. And they don't really talk about those things a lot in betting content in mixed martial arts. And so I try and bridge that gap. I really, I used to grow up reading the stats section of the newspaper, and I didn't really care that much about baseball, but I'd look through the scores of everything and just see how people were doing and see what the odds were. I didn't even know what they were when I was young, but that was always fascinating to me. And so that's what I like to talk about as well when we talk about these fights. We'll talk about the action. We'll talk about the punches and the kicks and the techniques. And I like to, wrestle and grapple and throw punches and kicks as much as the next guy. But I also like to think about the math and the data and trying to understand that side of the game. So if you guys value that, if you guys try and, take a mathematical approach to winning at sports betting, then go ahead and show a little bit of love and support. The simplest ways to do that, just like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. And if you're watching with us on social media, on X, then go ahead and hit a like button there, a retweet, share it with your audience. It means a lot to me. And I will always try and do right by you, where if you promote my stuff to somebody else, I'll try and keep it just as high quality. I'll try and keep it just as informative and also try and keep you guys entertained as well as best we can. So thank you so much. And thank you to Vincent who says, wish I could hit the like button twice. Thank you so much, Vincent. You're the man for the positive comment. All respect towards you, Liam. You aren't biased by any means. And even if you pick one side, you give good advice on the other side to see their chance. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. And Ryan says, hit the like button. You know that. I appreciate you. Our guy Dixon says, the trend is your friend till the end. No doubt. And back to the action, guys. What is the undefeated trend? Why did I pull this up? Because we got Lerone Murphy, 5-0 as a favorite. Undefeated trend. There was one fight. I think it was against Gabriel Santos. Very controversial decision. A lot of people felt like it could have went the other way. Super close. But that was the only time that it's really been tested. This guy, Lerone Murphy, has been pretty much aces as a favorite so far in the UFC. And if we go back and look, let's examine his run. He's 14-0-1, did have a draw in the promotion as well against Zubaira Tukhugov on short notice as a debutant. That was in September of 2019. Since then, he got a first-round TKO against Ricardo Ramos, a unanimous decision against Douglas Silva de Andrade. He absolutely evaporated Makwan Amirkhani. After losing the first round, he hit him with a knee and just destroyed him. It was crazy, crazy knockout in that fight. He won a split decision. This is the one I referenced against Gabriel Santos, very controversial. Then you look at the Josh Kulabau fight, clean win against the guy who's kind of been underperforming in the division, but a guy that I respect, certainly, a well-rounded guy. And then Edson Barboza, he goes out there and gets the unanimous decision. I thought he was going to finish Barboza. He hurt him bad. Barboza's a tough bastard, man, hard to put away, and it was a good fight overall. Both guys went out there and put it on the line. Meanwhile, you look at Dan Ige. I thought he looked very good against Diego Lopes, but he showed off, a common problem for Dan Ige, which is he likes to come on strong late. He stays durable. He's hard to put away, but you could definitely get some early momentum against Dan Ige at times. And we've definitely seen that. Say that part about the first round to Amirkhani again. Lerone Murphy lost the first round to Makwan Amirkhani for sure. I don't know if you guys watched that. He got out grappled in that fight a little bit. Makwan, though, what I should note is he's a first round fighter. Like if you want to say like anybody in the UFC's history has been like a first round fighter, Makwan Amirkhani, the definition of cigarette cardio, love the guy to death. But if you watch the guy fight, he has 6 minutes to kill you, and that's it. He goes out there. He's got an excellent flying knee knockout over Andy Ogle in like 2 seconds, and he got a cool series of front chokes. But aside from that, the guy just has a style that is not built for 15 minutes of mixed martial arts. He's going overhead throws and all this crazy shit. So Lerone Murphy basically knew, if I don't get finished in the first round, I'm going to win. And then he stuck it out and he didn't get finished. So I think that you look at Lerone Murphy, he had the right approach to that fight. But ultimately, Makwan did win the first round. So you could call it however you want. And then he came out and got folded about a minute into the second. So it wasn't a great strategy even that night. You look at Dan Ige. He's got tremendous power in his hands. Knockout win over Damon Jackson. Knockout win over Andre Fili. Knockout win over Gavin Tucker. $50K apiece. And then, if you look back, I mean, he fought a couple guys that are, no longer with the promotion. A Mike Santiago, Jordan Griffin, Danny Henry, Kevin Aguilar, Mirsad Bektic. And then the split decision win that he has over Edson Barboza, I'll tell you what, it was not as impressive as Lerone Murphy's, not by a long shot. He got dropped by a body shot in that fight. He pulled the guard off of it. I think that it's a weird fight for me on paper because Dan Ige is a guy that seems like he's a really perennial tough out. He's very skilled everywhere. I think he's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but when you look at this matchup on paper, I just don't know what is a discernible huge advantage for Lerone Murphy. I think he's a little bit faster. That's probably it. I think he's probably a little bit better of a wrestler as well. But I just look and I say, Ige, what he does well is he's damn durable. He's got good cardio. He can fight for 15 minutes. And he's going to make it a dogfight, right? In the last fight against Diego Lopes, he had his best round in round 3, and it looked like, if there was a round 4 and 5, he was going to come on strong. Dan Ige definitely has some gatekeeper vibes, no doubt about it. I do think this is just not, if I was Lerone Murphy's manager, I wouldn't have taken this fight. To be honest with you, Dan Ige, I thought it was the worst call out I ever heard when Joe Anderson Brito called out Dan Ige. I was like, why would you call out the one guy that's impossible to finish in the division and almost nobody looks good beating him? If you look, Dan Ige has lost a couple fights where he gets out wrestled, he gets out grappled. And I guess that's the path for Lerone Murphy here of least resistance, right? Would just be to try and take this guy down, right? But he's well coached, man. Eric Nixick, a very good coach, and he says Dan Ige is like his favorite pupil. You know, one of his favorite pupils, a guy that he really has always kept under his wing, right? I'm gonna have to watch a little more tape on this one. Like the line seems off to me just instinctually here, but I've always been a big Lerone Murphy guy. In terms of seeing him as a guy with talent, seeing him as a guy with a real prospect status in the UFC's 145-pound division. One thing that I tweet on a yearly basis is my dark horses. So I'm going to see if I can pull this up on Twitter right now. Ige had Lopez in hell. Give me Ige. Yeah, he absolutely did. And that was a weird kind of short notice booking, but it still, I think, is something worth examining. So let me see if I can find this tweet. The dark horse of the division. That is typically what I look at. Oh no. I'm seeing all my messages from Dark Horse, who's another MMA capper. I'm not seeing what I'm looking for. I'll have to go back and find it and I'll retweet it for you guys. But essentially, I put out these things where I like to see, if I could try and look at people ranked between 10 and 15 in their division who are capable of making a run and being a dark horse. And sometimes you look and like all the people that were ranked 10 through 15 end up being complete busts and like getting unranked from the UFC. But sometimes you find diamonds in the rough, right? And you find fighters that are criminally underranked. And I take pride in my talent scouting as one of my skills. So that is one thing that I've always looked to do. And I did list Lerone Murphy, I'm 90% sure, as my dark horse of the 145-pound division back at the time when he was ranked 11 through 15. And now I would be surprised if he's not in the top 10. Let's go back to the UFC.com page. Actually, he's number 12. Man, what do you have to do to get a top 10 ranking in featherweight these days? I feel like Lerone Murphy has put in a very solid body of work. And I guess you could say the same thing for Dan Ige. Again, we'll look at the losses for Dan Ige. He lost to Diego Lopez on like 6 hours notice. You give him a total pass there. I think the worst loss on his resume is the loss to Bryce Mitchell, right? And that's the one that gives me pause in this matchup in terms of getting to the window with Dan Ige. Is Bryce Mitchell is frankly not as skilled or talented as Lerone Murphy. Is he a dynamic grappler? Is he a handful? Is he a specialist? Yes. But like, is he as well-rounded an athlete as Lerone Murphy? I don't think that he is. Then you look back at the Nate Landwehr fight. It's a fine win, solid win. He hurt Nate a couple times there, landed big shots. The Damon Jackson win was crispy, good win. Loses to Movsar Evloev, no skin off your nose, but it wasn't particularly close. Loses to Josh Emmett. That was a close fight, but again, kind of loss that does set you towards being a gatekeeper a little bit. Chan Sung Jung, same deal. Got out wrestled, out grappled easily. The Calvin Kattar loss hasn't aged particularly good either. So I think Dan Ige is a good guy and a tough out, but he's 10-7 in the UFC, guys. He's almost like 50%, right? Like he's just batting over 50%. And meanwhile, Lerone Murphy, 6-0-1 in the promotion, right? Hasn't lost yet. Maybe the best British prospect south of 155 pounds. So Robot Chicken says, Liam, I think Murphy would have been ranked higher, but he was inactive for a long time. Good to see him fighting more. Yeah, and his background is crazy, guys. Like I said, I believe he was shot multiple times. You guys can go read the story about it, but changed his life for the better after that. And, God bless him for it. Crazy life. I think ultimately right now at the current odds, it's simply a dogger pass situation. I think both these guys are deserved, top 15 ranked guys. And so for that reason, they could both be competitive. I think if you had to favor one fighter over the other, I would favor Lerone Murphy. I think he's a little bit more talented, a little bit more upside, probably a touch younger in this fight as well. But I don't think it should be a runaway line. I think it should be a close fight. And it probably goes to decision more often than not. Both these guys are quite durable. And it would be, a real feather in either one of their cap if they were able to take the other guy out of there. Pick'em says picked Ige there. Could have won if he didn't get taken down in the third. Ige was piecing him up on the feet, but kept getting taken down and controlled every round. Yeah, that's what I mean. I do think Lerone Murphy can wrestle. Mitchell just wrestled and one more scrambles right, had back control. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see what else. I guess you have to beat Ige to get into the top 10. Yeah, fair enough, Joe. Shout out to you. Another thing, when it comes down to visible damage, if that could, I feel like Ige wears damage a bit more visibly than Murphy. Yeah, that's very possible as well. Eric uses Dan as a uke for his instruction. They're dialed in. Absolutely. No doubt about that. Jersey in the house. Love to see it, Jimbo. Appreciate you. Well, there you have it, guys. That's the thoughts that we have on this Lerone Murphy contest. Weird fight, but that's the way we see it. Now we got Shara Magomedov against Armen Petrosyan. And once again, guys, we'll refer to our undefeated trends list. Shara Magomedov, quietly 3-0 as a UFC favorite, just qualifies for the list with that 3-0. We require 3 fights to call it a trend. And he's sitting at about a -155 compared to a +130, the comeback on Armen Petrosyan, the Armenian against the Russian. And I don't think that this is an easy fight to call either, right? And you guys might notice a theme here. Not easy fights to call, but oftentimes there's a pretty sizable favorite. This one is at least a closer line fight. I definitely lean towards the Shara side in terms of who they're setting this up for promotionally. I mentioned Shara Magomedov can only fight in this part of the world, right? So he's got to be very selective with that. And you look at Shara and, you know, he's got wins over Bruno Silva, Antonio Tricoli, and Michal Oleksiejczuk. The Tricoli win, you know, he got to finish. The Bruno Silva win and Michal Oleksiejczuk, he had to go to decision both times. I think he will have to go to decision here if he is to beat Armen Petrosyan. Petrosyan has one loss via knockout. And if you look back, that was against Hassan Yousefi at AMC Fight Nights in 2021, a 7-3-1 opponent, first round knockout. So it's possible, but he's had a bunch of fights, competitive fights, and he hasn't gotten knocked out. He fought Gregory Rodriguez, Caio Barajo, AJ Dobson, Christian Leroy Duncan, and didn't get finished by any of those guys. Now, he did get submitted in the first round by Adolfo Vieira. And I do think that when you look back, a guy like Adolfo Vieira, I did think he was going to beat Armen Petrosyan. I have a document. Let's see if I can find this. I keep all my stuff in a Google format, right? Where it makes it really easy for me to share documents with people. So I'll show you guys what like my typical navigation document looks like. So if you guys see this, the reason I use the Google interface, I could just click through and go add all these different documents, and then it makes it really easy for people to scroll through them, right? But one other thing that I did is I went through and I made a photo journal because I'm a nerd, okay? If you guys want to know how detailed my research can be sometimes, Liam's Nerd Hours, Petrosyan's lack of adequate takedown defense and grappling fundamentals, fight-by-fight UFC run starting in 2021. This is what I did before that fight. And if you look back, there's many instances of him just showing wrestling deficiencies against Rodriguez, against Kalen on the Contender Series, and I documented all of it, right? And also the same thing against Caio Barajo, right? All these takedown sequences. So I truly believe in my research when I do a lot of these fights. And I think that this guy's wrestling is no good. I think Armen Petrosyan is a good kickboxer, but I do think he's a little bit on the lower volume side. I don't think he's a very dangerous knockout threat. You know, he does have a knockout win pre-UFC, or excuse me, several pre-UFC. And I was going to say the one on the Contender Series was absolutely sensational, right? When you look, Kalen Kolev, that knockout was fantastic, right? Came upstairs with that high kick and put him down. But I think the problem in this fight is like the way to beat Shara Magomedov is even if you have shitty wrestling and grappling, to wrestling grapple him because his wrestling and grappling is not good. And Michal Oleksiejczuk is like a guy who's on the back nine of his career, and I'm just going to call it the way I see it. Like, the guy is just checked out mentally. He's tough. He's still willing to compete. But if you look, the skills weren't there. He had left his gym. He seemed like a shell of himself as a fighter. And technically it wasn't there, right? He's getting submitted all the time. And he gets decisioned by Shara Magomedov because Shara Magomedov, doesn't know how to wrestling grapple, right? Couldn't put him away like that. So you look at a Bruno Silva. What does he do, guys? Strikes on the feet. What does Antonio Tricoli do? He's supposed to do jiu-jitsu or something, but he plays poker. And then you look at Michal Aleksandr. He's a striker. They're trying to set him up with guys that can't beat him, right? Because he's fun. He's got a cool gimmick. Now let's go back to the list. These are the things I look at, right? We talk about the trends. Here, let's share our screen. We talk about the trends as being important, okay? So the trend says Shara Magomedov as a favorite is 3-0. Now I'm going to show you something else, okay? Magomedov, there's a few different Magomedovs. So, in fact, I'm not going to show you everything. You'll have to check the Patreon for that one. But in any case, the Shara Magomedov point there is that he's been a guy who, if you've went to the window with him so far, he's been successful for you, right? If you look at this list, okay, the guy is number 6 on the social media is ranked on this card. Is that by accident? No, right? The guy's very, very popular. And he's taking on an Armen Petrosyan who doesn't make the top 15, okay? So what is Armen Petrosyan? Russian Muay Thai. That's what he is. And what is Shara Magomedov? Russian Muay Thai. So the way I see it is pretty simple. I think that if somebody gets finished here, then the fight will be fairly adjudicated. I think if the fight is very close and goes to the scorecards, I think they will absolutely try and rob it for Shara. And that's the way I see it. I think they would definitely prefer to see the Russian go over to the Armenian. But I also think when you look at a guy like Armen Petrosyan, he does have some knockout power. You can't rule that out entirely. I don't think that Shara is a world beater. I do think he is a human. I think he can be beat. I've seen him get tapped out in jiu-jitsu match and then kick the guy in the butt and get real frustrated. So I definitely see Shara as talented, but I don't think he's a world beater. And I definitely think that, if he gets matched up with a wrestler or a grappler, the rubber's going to meet the road. But 3 fights and he has almost 1 million followers. Wow. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And I think that that's something that you want to keep in the back of your mind, right? Know who you're betting on and against in all facets. And this guy's a star. So fade him carefully. I'm not saying this is the wrong time. Maybe it is the right time. He's taken on I would say, the best guy he's fought so far in the UFC. But I also think it's a competitive fight, right? And we've seen Armen Petrosyan. What's one thing we know about him? Competitive decisions. Competitive decision with Gregory Rodriguez. He got out-wrestled by Caio Barajo. He beat AJ Dobson. And then, honestly, Christian Leroy Duncan fought like a fool. No disrespect to the man. He's a very good fighter. He fought like a fool. He was like showing the man his ass and like walking backwards towards him. It's a very strange fight to revisit. And I guess that was partially from frustration, but ultimately I just didn't like what I saw there. All right, folks. So if we were to give a final lean there, I would say my lean is towards Shara Magomedov. But I will do a little more due diligence before I finalize that. This man is going to be poisoned in every continent. Yo, don't even wish that into the world, but I can't put it past them, bro. Cole says, good morning, Liam. Always good to hear from you. Hey, cheers to you, Cole. Thank you so much for your support, my brother. A sip of the coffee in your honor. And now, guys, we are on the prelim portion of the event. So we're going to switch back over to the UFC. And I did mention we're going to go in depth on the top 2 fights on the card. We touched on all the main card fights in some depth. Here's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to go rapid fire. My goal is to get us out of here in a 2-hour show round. So let's make sure that we get through these fights pretty quick. Ibo Aslan and Raffael Cerqueira. I think that both of these guys have some merit in terms of their chance to win this fight. I watched Raffael Cerqueira, and I don't I don't come away very impressed. I don't think he's a bad fighter, but I'm watching him against guys that looked very average to me just from the eyeball test at best, right? And I'm trying to be respectful here. Let's go back and look at his record because I want to make sure that I know who I'm talking about. I watched him fight Ivan Olsen Diaz, who is 1-1. And guys, it's a travesty of a fight. That was in January of this year. Like, the guy's not taking part in real competitive bouts. He's fought a 6-3 opponent, 1-1, 4-1, 0-1, 9-7, 17-9, 10-6, 4-1, 2-3. Most of these guys are no bueno, right? And now he's going to step up to fight Ibo Aslan, and I think Ibo Aslan is just okay, right? I don't think this guy's the bee's knees or anything like that. But Turkali is no good, and Turkali was able to push him. Paulo Hanato is simply no good, in my view, not UFC level. And this guy just doesn't have great cardio, in my view, Ibo Aslan. If you look at Ibo, I think he's going to have every opportunity to land on this guy early. I think when you look at Raffael Cerqueira, the guy on the tape that I was watching, mostly just gets backed up against the fence, covers up, then fires off a couple of shots. Like, he just does not seem super assertive out there. He seems very reactive, pretty passive. I will watch more tape on him, but in the tape that I watched, guys, it was against a not good opponent, and I came away not impressed. I'm not an Ibo Aslan guy, but I'm a little surprised to see him as a dog here. I think both these guys don't have a very bright future in the UFC, to be frank. But let's go back one more time to our list, okay? Ibo Aslan, 169,000 followers, all right? Nothing to sneeze at for a guy who's just gotten here recently, okay? Meanwhile, on the other side, who's he fighting? Rafael Cerqueira. Ever heard of him before this week? Me neither. So I think that this is a pretty clear setup. Again, they've tried a million setups, right? Anshul Jubilee against Mike Breeden. They set him up, and he got set up. So I think that this is the kind of fight where they want to see Ibo Aslan go out there and do well. I don't really think that Rafael Cerqueira is the real deal Holyfield, but I'll watch more tape and find out. He's got 2 wins by submission. I haven't seen that on tape, and he fought 0-1 Gutenberg Souza and submitted him with an arm triangle choke, and he submitted 10-6 Silvio Da Silva with an arm triangle choke. So it seems like he's just got one move, and that Silvio Da Silva guy is 0-4 career to the sub. So I don't really think that I've seen enough from, Rafael, what's his name again? Cerqueira, the Lion. I don't think I've seen enough from him to pick him here. I'll do more tape, though. I'll do more tape. I'm not an Ibo Aslan guy, right? You'll never hear me say, like, oh, Ibo Aslan, he's the future. I think he's not very good. But I don't think that this fight is unwinnable for him. I think he could certainly land early. And I think his best chance to win any fight is a KO1. And I think against this guy, that's live. So we'll leave it there and scroll to the next one, guys. So let's go ahead and present this on our screen. Oh, wow. That's interesting. So a couple of our people in the chat, our guy Joe says, I've only heard of him since Jailton Almeida said in his past few interviews, the UFC needs to bring him in. So that's very interesting to me. If Jailton is saying they need to bring him in, then I'll try and find Instagram stuff about this guy and whether he's grappling and whether he's a high-level guy. Because on the fight tape I saw, there wasn't a lot of grappling, right? But if that's something that's in his resume, Ibo Aslan is not a good grappler, okay? He got absolutely audited by Anton Turkali. So I definitely think that's a point of emphasis. Also, he looks like a male model, and I feel like that archetype of fighter doesn't tend to work out all that often. In any case, our guy Cowboy says, popping in late. I'll have to catch the replay. Enjoy the rest of the stream, Liam. Appreciate you, Cowboy. Thank you for stopping by, my brother. All right, here we go. Number 10, Geoff Neal versus number 15, Rafael dos Anjos. This line is cracked. If this was Geoff Neal before he had the bloodborne pathogens and whatever the hell else derailed his career, I would get it. Listen, RDA for me, the problem is when he cuts to 155 these days, He doesn't have the cardio no more, right? It cuts away from his cardio. It saps his cardio and it saps his durability. And you need both those things if you're going to compete at 155. At 170, RDA is a motherfucker. I think he's a little too small to beat a lot of guys at 170, right? And maybe that's the case against Geoff. But a lot of times, what is Geoff leveraging against opponents? His southpaw stance against theirs, and they don't have the southpaw stance, that southpaw ability. I think that RDA does have the ability to switch stances and compete from both stances. And I believe that it's his birthday. I'm just double checking. Yeah, it's going to be his birthday, his 40th birthday on the night of the event. And I really have always respected RDA. Okay. If you look at RDA's fight career, he lost to Mateusz Gamrot, and the Gamrot fight is a fight where I thought he looked great, right? Like, I just tell you the truth. I thought he came out there and looked sensational in round one, hurt him badly with the big knee up the middle. And then he got outpaced by a young man who really could wrestle and grapple his ass off the whole time. And that was what happened. So, hey, hats off to Gamrot. He did his job. I bet RDA plus 300, pretty big there. And it didn't work out, right? But ultimately, I thought it was a much closer fight than the line. And a lot of people that laid the minus 400 told me they agreed with me. So in any case, he didn't win, right? You look at the Vicente Luque fight. For me, that's the fight that's scary. I don't think Luque is there anymore. I don't think he's a top level guy, but he was big. He was physical. He's a real 170, and he's a real legit grappler. And I don't think people give him that credit. And so he was able to push through, but now I see a guy in the Barberena fight. They gave him a free win, right? They set him up. The Fiziev fight, guys, RDA was fighting his ass off against Fiziev. Like, he was fighting so well. And for me, to see him lose that fight to Fiziev via knockout, I was so thankful that Fiziev caught him late, because I was like, man, this is a close fight. And like, I don't know if Fiziev's going to be able to keep pushing like this. RDA took some shots in that fight. He's a tough bastard, man. Then he fought Renato Moicano. And this is the thing that I think people are forgetting. I bet 7.5 units on RDA, minus 150, minus 160, whatever it was, against Moicano. And guys, he beat Moicano within an inch of his life. Like, he absolutely beat the shit out of Moicano on a short notice catchweight fight up at like 165. Then you look at the fight that he had against Paul Felder. Super close, super competitive fight. Barely eked out the win there. Got out grappled by Michael Chiesa. Got decision by Leon Edwards. Beat Kevin Lee. Arm triangle choked him. Lost to Kamaru Usman via unanimous decision. But then the Colby Covington fight. If you guys go back and watch that, I'm telling you, like, you could easily score that fight for RDA. Like, if you're not a Colby Covington fan, you could score that fight for RDA easily. So RDA has been that guy at 170 where he was like one fight away from a title, right? He beat up a lot of guys at 155. He beat real guys at 170. Tarek Safadine when it mattered. Neil Magny when it mattered. Robbie Lawler when it mattered. So he had a couple good wins there. And that was back in 2017, keep in mind, right? Beat Kevin Lee when Kevin Lee mattered. Beat Paul Felder before Paul walked away. Beat Renato Moicano. Renato is at the biggest point he's ever been right now. And RDA dummied him. Like, not even close. Like, just beat the shit out of him. So I think about this fight and I say, again, if you give me Geoff Neal from before he had any problems with his health, I would probably be with people in thinking like, yeah, he's just too physical, too big, too strong. But now I think to myself, okay, against Ian Gary, like, he's let the fight slip him by, bro. His coach was like screaming at him the whole time. I thought Ian Gary was going to win the fight and look well there. But ultimately, like, Geoff Neal just kind of let him off the hook. Like, I thought he was going to offer more resistance, and he just didn't. Then you look at the fight that he had with Shavkat Rakhmonov, and he fought well there, right? He did good against Shavkat. But in the Shavkat fight, we also saw some of those grappling liabilities brought to bear, where Shavkat was able to get behind him after doing a little damage and put him away, right? And if you look at a guy like Geoff Neal, he's been submitted twice in his career. Okay. He was submitted by Martin Sano back in 2013. He was knocked out by Kevin Holland back in 2017. And then he was submitted by Shavkat in 2023. So he's a durable fighter. He's not easy to put away by any means, but he's been finished 3 times. He's 34 years of age. He's not a spring chicken either. And I look at a guy in the other side, Rafael dos Anjos, landed a huge knee against Gamrot, could have put him away, right? The other thing is, you look at these fights. Does he have a grappling advantage against Gamrot? No. Does he have a grappling advantage against Luque? I would argue that maybe in pure like technique, maybe, but in terms of physicality, no, he did not. Then you look at Rafael Fiziev. Did he have a grappling advantage there? Yes, he did. Is it easy to take down Fiziev? It's very, very difficult to take down Fiziev. Then you look at Brian Barberena. Easy to take him down, so RDA took him down and dominated him. Renato Moicano, not super easy to take down, but he just beat the shit out of him on the feet. Then you look back at the Paul Felder fight. I can't really remember where that fight played out, but I think he might have taken him down for portions of it. My point being, I think RDA does better in fights where he has the ability to wrestle his opponent. He's one of these guys where his game functions best when all things are working together. If you look back, he absolutely audited. This is one of the cleanest 5-round title wins that you'll see against Anthony Pettis. He took him down, he planted him against the side of the fence, and he absolutely smashed him. So I think of a guy like RDA as dangerous enough, a guy who's very skilled in all positions, and certainly a guy you don't want to count out too early, a guy you don't want to write off. I think he's worthy of your respect. I would be hesitant to lay a guy who's been very passive in his fights recently, and Geoff Neal, against a guy like RDA, who on his birthday at 170, not cutting this weight, he's got nothing to lose, right? And a guy with nothing to lose, a dangerous man. So I think RDA is a live underdog, but I'll do more tape study because I want to go back and watch the grappling transitions against Luque. Geoff Neal is a tricky guy, right? He's very strong physically, but I do have some questions about where he's at in his career. I remember he had the DUI during a fight camp and certain things that, caused a little bit of skepticism, and you want to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I think it's kind of translated in some of the performances as well that have looked flat recently. And meanwhile, RDA, despite losing, I thought he showed a very good form in his last fight. So next up, guys, Mateusz Rebecki and Myktybek Orolbai. Rebecki did some pretty good work early against his Brazilian counterpart last time out. I'm trying to remember CDF, right? Carlos Diego Ferreira. He was doing well. He landed a big shot on the feet, but then he started to slow down a little bit. He started to get touched up a little bit. His face got mashed into a paste. He was swollen. He looked damaged. He got beat up really badly there. And, this is not an easy comeback fight. Like, I think Rebecki is a very talented guy. I think he could win a lot of fights. I know some people think, that he could be one of my doppelgangers. I like to think I have a little bit more hair than my guy Rebecki. Knock on wood, we could keep it that way. But in any case, when Orolbai got to the UFC and he was up a weight class on short notice against Uros Medic, I laid the chalk price at -140, and I also bet the submission prop at +525, and he cashed me out on both. I like Myktybek Orolbai. I think that the guy is money. I think that unless you kill the man, he's going to keep coming after you. I think we saw against Elves Brenner that you could put him in some, dangerous situations. He's going to keep pushing. He's going to keep fighting. He's going to keep trying to win. So I think Rebecki at his best, good chopping low kicks, sharp combinations on the feet, willing to walk forward, get in the fire and keep going. But I think he could take a little too much damage. I think Orolbai might hit just slightly harder. I think that if you look at the Rebecki side, Meatball makes a good point. You could bet him pre and then get Orolbai at a better number late round 1. I don't think that's a bad idea. I do think Orolbai makes some mistakes. I think he can be hit cleanly on the feet. I do think he takes a lot of risk as well on the feet. But I think when you watch this guy grapple, he's sensational. I think when you watch him wrestle, he's sensational. I think when you watch his pace, it's very, very good. And he also hits like a truck. So all those things combined, I think that this guy is very difficult to deal with. And if Rebecki had a ton of momentum coming in here, I would think it was a much more competitive fight. But trying to rebuild and regroup and get back on track against a guy like this, who's got no doubt in his mind, who is a killer, who's got all these skills everywhere, I think it's a really tough matchup, and I don't think they did Mateusz Rebecki any favors here. Give me Myktybek Orolbai in the next pick. Abus Magomedov against Bruno Ferreira. This is a really fun fight, guys. Abus Magomedov is the favorite right now, and he's got pretty good takedown defense. Going back and watching his fights, but I do think that on the feet, he does get tired when he's in these longer extended fights at times, and I think Bruno Hulk Ferreira, he kind of fought reckless against Dustin Stoltzfus, but if you watch his fight against Gregory Hobocop Rodriguez, woo boy, this guy has some really slick boxing at times, and he's like moving his head, firing back in rhythm, feinting, and he absolutely killed Robocop. And if you look back, guys, Robocop has only lost twice in the UFC. Once was against Armen Petrosyan, who we recently mentioned. That was via a close split decision. The other one was Bruno Ferreira, who knocked him dead. And he's 7-2 in the UFC, guys. He's got 7 wins under his belt. And this guy, Bruno Ferreira, they called him up on short notice, and he absolutely banged that guy out of there. Then you look at this guy, Abus Magomedov, and he also knocked out Dustin Stoltzfus. They have that common win, but Abus just took him out right away, hit him with a front kick to the face, followed him to the ground basically, and finished. Bruno Ferreira, this guy's a ball of energy, man. He's coming out and hitting judo throws on people, slamming them to the ground. His ground and pound is disgusting. He's got power in his hands. And we've also seen him get clipped once, right? He got knocked out getting a little over aggressive against Nursultan Ruziboev. And now he's fighting another OV name. He's fighting another guy named Magomedov. And I do think there's a world in which Bruno Ferreira gets punted in the face and, front kick knocked out here. I do think Abus Magomedov is sharp with that strike. Bruno's a little bit on the shorter end. He kind of leads forward with his face at times. He likes to do a little bit of the swaying with 2 hands at the sides. And that does leave you up the middle for linear attacks. I think Abus Magomedov would be wise to pursue them here. But I also think that when you just look at a guy like Bruno Ferreira, I don't like the prospect of laying chalk against guys like this because he's an athletic freak. He's skilled in all positions. He's been doing judo 23 years. He's been doing jiu-jitsu like 19 years. He's been, doing Muay Thai and all these things. He's a killer in terms of power and willingness to mix it up. So I think that both these guys are kind of like round one is their specialty, and everything beyond that maybe is a little bit of a diminished version. But if you just ask me, like, who has a more sustainable looking game, like probably Bruno Ferreira. Like, he's just well-rounded in all his skills, but maybe his high amplitude offense is what will ultimately hold him back. Abus Magomedov seems like a guy the UFC's tried to invest in. They put him in big opportunities right out the chute. They put him in against Sean Strickland. I think that Abus is probably a deserved slight favorite here, but I don't really trust his gas tank. And the ABCs, they always bet on cardio. Neither one of these guys has perfect cardio, but I almost feel like Bruno Ferreira, if you were to say like who has a better career before all is said and done, I think Bruno Ferreira has a better career. But I think that who wins the fight on Saturday, it's anybody's guess. Yeah, I'd probably put this at a pick 'em price. Maybe Abus minus 120 plus 100 Bruno Ferreira, something like that. Next up, guys, we got Kennedy Nzechukwu and Chris Huggy Bear Barnett. And why not Huggy Bear? Kennedy Nzechukwu has been absolutely putrid as a favorite, just losing money hand over fist if you're betting on this guy as a favorite. And I believe, his last opponent was Ovince St. Preux. Okay, he's 6-5 in the UFC. Ovince St. Preux was minus 700 against Ovince, and he lost a split decision. And honestly, I thought it should have been a unanimous decision. You look at the Dustin Jacoby fight, he gets knocked out in the first round, and Dustin Jacoby is simply not known for being a huge power puncher. So he's definitely a kickboxer with some experience and some power, but wasn't a great look. Daun Jung, who I believe has been let go from the company. If I'm wrong about that, I apologize, but he was finished via standing elbows in the first round there. Another bad look. He lost to Nikolai Negumereanu. That was kind of a bullshit split decision, but still, he didn't put a clear stamp on it. His wins in the UFC, Devin Clark, Iwan Kutalaba, Carl Roberson, Danilo Marks, Carlos Ulberg, and Darko Stosic. With the exception of Carlos Ulberg, there isn't a pretty name in the bunch. And I think that maybe the Kutalaba win has aged okay, but you look at the Roberson win, doesn't mean anything. Marquez win means nothing. The Ulberg win, I mean, he got beat within an inch of his life, and then the guy just fell apart in front of him, and he was able to take him out, pick up the pieces. But losing to Paul Craig as well, I just think there's been a lot of red flags on the Kennedy and Nzechukwu side over time, certainly enough to not lay that huge price. And meanwhile, on the other side, Chris Beast Boy Barnett, Huggy Bear, whatever you want to call him, 0-1 career to the submission, but he's out there taking grappling matches, trying to do his thing, up his skill set a little bit, up his game. And if you look at the guy, he's had boxing matches, kickboxing matches, mixed martial arts fights. The guy's been a fighter his whole life, and he's got 18 wins by knockout, 3 wins via submission, and he's got a 5-4 record to the decision as well. So it's not like if you make it the whole 15 minutes with him, he's just going to give up on you. And also, when you look at his losses, a lot of them are to somewhat recognizable names. Yoel Romero, he lost the grappling match. Alex Nicholson, a guy who's been around the scene for a while. Ben Rothwell, Martin Buday in the UFC. Ben Rothwell was a top 10 heavyweight in his day. Martin Buday is another one of these prospects, a younger guy in the division. He beat John Vellante and Jake Collier, two of the, let's say less athletic, less jacked guys in the heavyweight division. So this would be a difference, right? Kennedy Nzechukwu is an athlete. The guy looks like an athlete. He looks like a fighter. However, I don't like the way he responds to adversity. I don't like how passive he can be. I don't like that his coach is always trying to yell at him and get on him, and he needs to be coached through every minute, every second, every position, every situation. I don't think he's a very natural fighter in that way. And I think for Chris Barnett, like, he's definitely a little low level, but if you look, the way to beat him is to get him in the clinch and beat him up there. And I guess Kennedy could try and do that. But if you don't do that, he's kind of dynamic with his entries. Like, he's a little fast. He's a little bit athletic. Kennedy is probably going to be way longer, way bigger, way taller. So you could try and leverage some of those assets, But I don't really think that Kennedy and Nzechukwu is just like head and shoulders above him in terms of skills. Like, in fact, Chris Barnett is like a traditional martial artist. He's probably been in the game longer. So ultimately, slight lean towards Chris Barnett or pass in terms of the betting situation for sure. Farid Basharat and Victor Hugo. These are two guys that I really like. Victor Hugo is my boy. He came back and commented on my YouTube video after we picked him on Contender Series. But he does have the better Basharat brother this week. I think it's price prohibitive, just to tell you the truth. Like, I think Farid has a great process, right? A much better process than Kennedy and Nzechukwu, a much more well-rounded, skilled game than Kennedy and Nzechukwu. But the difference is, like, Victor Hugo, I just think he's a serious fighter. Like, I don't think he's as good as Farid. So I think Farid should be probably like minus 300. But I think when you look at Victor is a dangerous guy on the feet. They call him Victor Striker. He's got knockout power. He can throw with kicks. He can throw with punches that'll end the night. And on the ground, he's got submission wins to his name. He's not a guy that's a fish out of water on the ground. I just think that Farid is a better decision maker with a better process. So I think he can go step 1, step 2, step 3 and advance his positions. Whereas I think Victor Hugo is an opportunist. He's looking to grab your leg and rip it off. He's looking to grab a choke and put you to sleep. But he's not really looking to go systemic position by position. So I think it's a fun fight. I think it's a good scrap. I guess if you press me for a pick, I will pick Farid Basharat, but Victor Hugo's my boy. I would never fade him at these prices. And I think Farid has got a very bright future and a brighter future than Victor Hugo, but the fight's only one time on Saturday. And I think Victor Hugo's alive in just about any fight. He's a killer, man. I think he's a really dangerous guy. Farid and Victor fight ends by sub, maybe. I don't hate that look. But I do think that if Victor wins this fight, it's probably by KO or decision, honestly. I don't think he's submitting Farid. Farid is a very talented grappler, but I do think that the way he would beat him is to hurt him really bad. Maybe he could submit him if he hurts him, or to force him into a kickboxing match. If this is a kickboxing match for 15 minutes, again, I think Farid can win it, but would I favor him? Probably not even minus 200, right? Like, I think if it was a pure striking match, I'd probably make it minus 150 at most. And even then, after I review tape, I could change my opinion about that. So my guy, Victor Hugo, is a guy I'm rooting for. I respect him, but he's got his hands full, man. Farid Basharat is the truth. Farid Basharat is not afraid to get into a scrap. He trains with some of the best guys in the world. 2 hotbeds for talent, Arizona at 135 and Las Vegas at 135. The New Yorkers went to Las Vegas and made it OP. I'm telling you guys, if you look, it's the Basharat bros. It's Raul Rosas Jr. It's Aljamain Sterling. It's Merab Dvalishvili. It's a whole murderer's row. Patchy Mix as well in there. And I just think that, many hands make light work and many knives sharpen all. These guys are all really, really good fighters. So they come in and they get in good work there. And I think Farid Basharat is going to continue to show that growth and improvement. But I think that if you look at Victor Hugo, I just don't think he's a slouch, man. Like I've really respected the guy coming in. He's been favored in both of his previous fights, opened like a pick'em on Contender Series, closed a big favorite. Last time out, he was like a minus 140 or something against Falcao, who's a very good jiu-jitsu player as well. So, yeah, I don't think he's a pushover. I don't think he's a slouch at all. Ismail Nardiev is making his return to the UFC. He's been out for a while. This guy can get chinned. I watched his fights. He does not have a very good ability to take damage, in my view. I definitely have seen him hurt, rocked a number of times. I saw him get armbarred as well. But I think that when you look at this fight, Bruno Silva hasn't been done many favors by the UFC. I think that his marketability is not great, not a great English speaker. And the fights have kind of been diminishing in quality as well. I do think he's got good skill in terms of, or I should say, I do think he's got good abilities to win fights, right? He's got knockout power. His grappling's not horrible, but I don't think his grappling is sensational. We've seen him give up his back to Wellington Turman. We've seen him get put down, taken down, put in the full guard. He is very confident from bad positions. Like he knew he was going to gas out Andrew Sanchez and then he eventually killed him. I think that against Nardiev, he could absolutely knock out Nardiev. That would not surprise me at all. But I think that Nardiev is probably the more process-based fighter. I think he could probably get takedowns. I think if Chris Weidman had been a little bit, more intelligent about his approach to the takedowns there, I thought he could have had a little more success in that phase. And ultimately, a guy like Bruno Silva, the way that fight was stopped was unfortunate with the eye pokes, but it's the nature of the business. And Chris Weidman, I think we got him like plus 2XX. And again, it was just one of those spots where, this sport is so volatile and crazy that imagine you had laid the minus 3XX to get that outcome. It would just be absolutely sickening. So for me, I'd always rather be on the plus money side more often than not, because of the inherent variance of mixed martial arts. But in this fight, I think the early numbers on Nardiev, I kind of get why people were going there. But the one thing I'll say is he shouldn't have UFC jitter debuts, from a debut because he's not making his debut. He's coming back, but it's also a big step up, a big opportunity early on in the night against a guy who's a seasoned vet. So I think it's a fun fight, man. And I do think both these guys can win inside the distance. I think Nardiev could submit. I think Bruno Silva could knock him out, but I also think Nardiev could grind his way to a decision here. That would not surprise me, but he's been finished a bunch in his losses. So it's really interesting fight. But give me the younger guy. Give me Nardiev. And last but not least, guys, we've got Carlos Leal and Rinat Fakhretdinov. And I think Rinat is a good fighter. Like his win over Brian Battle is a fantastic win. It's aged great. Brian Battle's a sensational fighter. But Rinat Fakhretdinov, if he does not finish, which he normally does not, then he will start to slow down if you offer him resistance. I think that Leal is the kind of guy where I need to go find tape of him wrestling and grappling. All the tape I could find, this guy's either knocking somebody out or fighting with them on the feet. But I think that he's got power. I think he's got a lot of intensity and self-belief. And I could just tell you guys, if you look back, I remember Nicholas Dalby, had big plus money numbers there against Rinat Fakhretdinov. And Fakhretdinov was in all sorts of trouble against what's his name? Against Dalby. And then he got the split decision. Before that, I had Easy Dose. Okay. I had Easy Dose Bigley. And then I ended up getting it, what's it called? Voided out, right? Because of the draw. And Easy Dose finished him, man. In that third round, he hit him so hard to the body. This dude was laying there hoping that the referee was going to intervene. So I will watch the Ray Cooper fight for his wrestling. I guess the UFC could want to do that. Sujit says, love the morning show. Call up to the big leagues. The truth is, though, a lot of guys that come from the PFL or whatever, they might not have a very serious resume. They might have come from the Challenger Series. They might have had a handful of fights. This guy's 21-5. That's a pretty serious record. 5-2 in the PFL. Both of his losses were via decision. He lost to Sadibou Sai And let's see who else. Both times. Guys, he lost to Sadibou both times, Sadibou, whatever you want to call it. He missed weight one time as well for a title fight, it seems like, or a playoff fight. So that seems like an important miss. But the guy's got power in his hands. There's no doubt about that. Seen him knock out a couple of guys on the tape, including David Zawada, former UFC fighter, Delano Taylor, chased that guy down and absolutely put him on ice skates in round 2. That was crazy. Corey Coop just destroyed him, like never let him get off the starting block. Beating Ray Cooper III is a pretty solid win, man. The Cooper family, long-standing, record in the sport, 25-11-1 for Ray Cooper. And is that the most admirable record you've ever seen? Maybe not, but did he win the PFL? Yeah, like the guy was really solid. So I think that when I'm looking at a Carlos Leal, if he can keep this fight upright, if he can defend some takedowns, like Rinat Fakhretdinov is a disaster waiting to happen on the feet. He has decent striking when he's slick early, when he's fast, when he's feeling good. When his conditioning starts to fail him, you could just watch the end of the fight that Rinat had with Dalby. He's literally swinging like these terrible, ugly punches, and Leal hits very hard in my view and like lines up his shots. So ultimately, guys, I think it's another dog or pass situation, and I'm going to do a little bit more tape and research. That's it, guys. That's the first look. 2 hours and 15 minutes. We did an early morning show. If you guys enjoyed this kind of format, let me know in the comment section down below. I always appreciate the feedback, and I do read it. If you leave a comment, I read it. If you leave feedback, I try and address it, whether that's with improvements on the show, whether that's with an answer back to you in the replies. Comments, questions, concerns, leave them down below. If you want to just show love and support, the easiest ways to do it, guys, drop a like on the video, get subscribed to the channel, go ahead and leave a comment. And then if you want to go one step further, if you want to get financially involved in the program and show a little extra love and support, I truly appreciate it. I try and give a value proposition. I try and give a lot of information for that, financial support. So if you're a channel member, if you're on Patreon, there's a ton of resource documents, stuff that I make on an independent basis weekly, right? But also you get access to the commentary from the sharpest chat in the game as well. So in the Patreon, a ton of sharp people talking about the fights, their thoughts, my thoughts, asking questions, and you guys can do all that as well. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, all the information is in the description box below. If you're curious where we were getting the odds from before, guys, this is Fight Numbers, and their information as well is in the description box below. A very sharp team over there. John Kelly, DFS, puts his projections together. So whether you want to go to the DFS tools that they have, whether you want to go to the fight prop finder that they have, a ton of stuff, both free as well as premium on their site. So go check out fightnumbers.com. Use my promo code Liam and they will hook you up. But that's all we got today, guys. God bless you all. Good luck with all your bets. Make sure that you come back later in the week for bets and banter, and I'll talk to you all again very soon. Thank you all for the support. See you guys.